Alan Robson with you, travelling around the Loch Ness area, and tonight we have a few things in store for you that are, well, out there, let's just say. First of all, we may just be depositing a demon or two into your house. Now, it's up to you whether you go with it or whether you don't. You are in control. How brave are you feeling tonight? And then a little bit later on, I intend to do the most I can to come face to face with the Loch Ness Monster. You're not going to believe what we have lined up tonight. Alan Robson's Nightowls, destination Loch Ness, beyond the monster. Now, what we want you to do tonight is just close your eyes. We're going to be taking you on a journey into darkness, a journey into, well, something that you will not expect. When you mention Loch Ness, you instantly think of the Loch Ness Monster. Well, we're going to be centering on him, there's no question about it. But we've got so many other things too. We have spoken to eyewitnesses, we've spoken to police officers, members of the armed forces, people who have seen the Loch Ness Monster. We got all of that for you, but we go far, far beyond. Also, we've been baiting traps for the monster all week. Well, we have the biggest piece of ginger bait to come. You're not going to believe what we're getting up to on Britain's most listened to. It's the Nightowls. But first, I think maybe it's never a bad thing to have a little bit of a retrospective.
Hi, Alan.
Hiya, Kenny.
It's not funny down here, I tell you. It is not funny at all.
Hey, there's some people that would give their right arm to a monster to be in a coracle on Loch Ness this time of night. I don't think anybody's ever done this at night. I know they've probably done it during the day, you'd think. So you're in a coracle, on the water now, splash some water. I don't believe you. You're not in a bath. You're not in a bath in a hotel like up the road or something.
I wish I was, Alan. I tell you what it is. It's very, very scary. The atmosphere here is unreal.
Apparently there's some mist rolling in across the surface of the loch.
Yeah, I can see that. Just thanks to Andy, first of all, because I've just got off his ship. It's called the Loch the Legend.
Right.
I've just got off his ship, and the sonar is fantastic because it's bleeping all the time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, there's lots and lots of bleeps. You can see like a big outline. They said it could be a shoal of fish. It could be something else. I don't know. They can't tell.
Right.
But I've just seen that. They've just put me in this little boat.
Now, how big is the coracle? I mean, because I know, I don't know how tall you are. What, about 5'11", 12,
I'm
6 foot?
6 foot, and I think this is about this. This is about 6 foot. Honestly, it's really small.
But it's circular. So how do you paddle it? Has it got like oar holes and oars on it?
It's got 2 metal bits on each corner, and then you've got to try and row and keep it in that direction. But it's very hard.
Now I've got a sneaky suspicion, Kenny, and this might be just because I know you. You're probably 3 inches from the shore.
I wish I was, Alan. The one that's done this put me halfway across. And honestly, I'll just describe it to you. It's inky black, apart from the moonlight, which is sort of casting glints right across the lock.
Inky black?
Yeah, honestly, there's like one or two lights on the lock as well, which I take it at other ships that are going up and down searching for the monster.
Is this stuff that's happening all the time anyway?
It seems to be that people, obviously, with the myth, if it is a myth, are just down here to search for it, and there's lots of people who are going up and down, covering the full 22 miles on different size boats up and down here, searching for it. You can hear little bleeps and stuff in the distance all the time. They're obviously searching for it, and it's such an... I wish I could describe it, Alan. It's eerie. The atmosphere. There's owls. There's actually little owls just making noises in the distance there.
Make them sing now, Kenny.
I wish I could. Honestly, it's too dark. I was carrying on before and laughing before. Now that I'm yelling, I can tell you it's the scariest thing I have ever done in my life.
I remember when we were kind of heading, just before we started talking to the Nightowls and getting ready, because we were on air at 10. And just before that, we'd stopped and we'd got out and we'd looked at a different lock.
Yeah.
And it was quite a size too, and there's a lot of water there, and the trees were overhanging it, and we were just stopping for a breath of fresh air. It looked fantastic. What's that noise?
There's a ship just going up the middle as we speak.
Is that what that beepy thing is?
Yeah.
That beepy thing, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought it was your coracle kind of...
No. I'm just splashing about trying to get some direction to get near the shore as soon as I can.
Because the ship's obviously not going to tow you back in.
No, they've just left me to get on with it, head for the nearest jetty. Unfortunately, I'm trying to look for a jetty. All I can see is trees and black sort of outlines, Alan. It really is creepy and scary down here.
It does sound it. What happened? I can just hear you paddling. No, it's good, Kenny. It's good. This is earth-shattering radio. This is groundbreaking radio, Kenny. Nobody's ever done this before, and you're on a coracle.
Get the ground at the minute, Alan. Honestly.
What happens if you land on the wrong bank, Kenny?
Well, at the minute, I haven't got a clue what direction I'm heading. I'm just trying to get, like I say, as near as I can. The drop is off in the middle, and now, bear in mind, this is a mile across. So it's like a half a mile I've got, and I'm just trying to get there.
Yeah, but if you head in the wrong direction, you go 22 miles, Kenny. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing, Alan, and this is really unusual. For some reason, there's like ripples, and there's like... Do you know when you see these white waves sort of thing?
Yeah.
White waves, and I cannot understand how there can be a current like that from somewhere, but there obviously is, because I can see it. You know, I'm right next to it, and there's sort of a white...
Is it not...
...blashing the bottom of my boat and stuff like that.
Is it not the wake off another boat? That's because you said a boat went up before. Could it be like the after effects of something like that?
Well, that's what I'm hoping it is, because obviously it's freaking me out at the minute.
Oh, here's something for you to do, Kenny.
Right.
You know how we put butter on you? And we did put a bit of butter on them.
Yeah.
And we also, truthfully, we got a bit, it was like a garlic bread thing. We thought, who knows? It might be like the flavour that monsters have been waiting for all their life. How about just sticking your hand in the water as far down as you can, as long as you're not going to tip the boat over? Do you think you could do that?
No, honestly, I cannot. I really cannot. It really is freaky and scary and...
Well, Kenny, I'm sorry, but it really is my job. On behalf of the listener, you said something in the car because, you know, you pride yourself on being a Scot when we only know you as a dick.
Yeah.
And and you did the speech, the little mini soliloquy from Braveheart. So if you can't put your hand in, stop rowing just for a minute. Can you stand up in the coracle?
If I do it might... Oh, God, no, I might just tip over, honestly.
I'm willing to risk it. I'm willing to go the extra yard. Kenny, are you? This is for Nightowls. It's for all we hold sacred. Can you stand up in the coracle? Right. Because honestly, if you fell in, we would roar.
Right.
People.
Okay, look, I'm going to stand up very
but you've got to do the thing from Braveheart now.
Oh no!
Come on, and you got to do it loud. You got to do it loud. I'm going to open the window. You're too far away. We'll never hear you through the window. But they might hear you at Urquhart Castle. So, right, loud as you can, because you're Scottish and proud. And this is what the people of Scotland... These are the words of William Wallace or Mel Gibson. We're not sure, but it was one or the other. Go for it. Right, okay. Don't talk down the phone. Just hold the phone back and let everyone on the lake hear your pride in Scotland.
You may take our lives, but you'll never take our freedom!
Oh, what about? That's fantastic! Absolutely fantastic! Kenny?
Yeah?
Can you, before you sit down... Can you also do the phrase from She-Ra and He-Man? Come on, you do that one as well. Right. Because they mightn't be Scottish, but they should have been. Go on.
Okay, then.
Nice and loud.
By the power of Grayskull!
Kenny, before you go, don't sit down yet. Now do the other famous chant of the Mutant Hero Ninja Turtles. Across the lake. Let's hear it. One more. Let's do this for Scotland. Go for it.
Which is Cowabunga!
Kenny, you've been a star. I don't know how long it's going to take you to kind of coracle back to the bank.
I've got to tell you this, Alan, when you shout that, honestly, it just echoes up like this valley up where the huge expanse of water, it just echoes up there.
I'm just imagining the scientist from Aberdeen University that says, and I'm sure I heard the monster shout Cowabunga. I can picture that going on right now.
Oh, God,
I must say...
a nervous laugh, I can tell.
Do you know that when you did, and I know joking aside, and we have made you suffer a bit, but are you sitting down again?
I am, yeah.
Good lad. So you're all right, you haven't tipped or anything?
Not yet.
Is there any water in the coracle?
There's a little bit in the bottom there, just sort of creeping in that. Yeah.
It's a slow leak. You got 4 or 5 minutes to get to the bank.
I'm about 250 yards off the bank.
250 yards, that's not too bad. But not when you're going in circles. But when you did the William Wallace thing, you know, I genuinely felt that was gripping and wonderful. There's a boat coming back again.
No, I don't know what's happened, but the moon, the light's just gone all of a sudden here.
Clouds across the moon? Yeah,
and it just went really the darkest I've ever seen this. I mean, the water's the same colour now as the night sky. It's just, it really is so...
Well, joking aside, and I know we've had some fun with you, I think it's, and truthfully, if I wasn't holding a microphone, I would love for this moment to be in a boat on Loch Ness.
Metro Radio. Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
I must say that it doesn't get any lighter, and the trees kind of cutting across, creating this strange shade from the rain, and it is a bit wet and rainy tonight. Kenny's still looking a bit white. We're taking you to the land of Satanist, the man described as the most evil man on earth, Aleister Crowley. Now, we've got a few things that are said to be cursed. This cemetery is one of them. We're going to be telling you the story of all of the children who burned to death here. But first of all, we discovered something while we were researching this that's very interesting indeed. And it seems that the more evil you are, the more likely it is that you're related to someone very, very famous. Now, when we were doing a show called Alien Jesus, we discovered that there were things like the lizard people, you know, people who were all interrelated, believed to be, perhaps, from the stars. Well, imagine if the most evil man ever to walk this earth was related to the president of the United States, and maybe related to 2 presidents. This is what we found out about Mr. Aleister Crowley.
Mr. Crowley, what went on in your head? Oh, Mr. Crowley, did you talk to the dead? Your life to me seems so tragic. Where the thrill it all? You pull out the beat.
from 1875 to 1947. He was called the most evil man on earth. Some of his early rituals, many people claim, involved the death of young girls and small children. And yet, this man managed to create a whole world and a whole religion that people across planet Earth even now still believe. Aleister Crowley, the Satanist, the Diabolist, the Witch. And yet, from time to time, we say, well, how can somebody like Aleister Crowley thrive when the world looks at him as a monster? Well, maybe he had connections. Maybe he had people close to him, people with power. And is it possible that President George Bush, and therefore President George W. Bush, could be related to Aleister Crowley? In 1924, Crowley was living in poverty in France. He'd just been kicked out of Italy by Mussolini for a whole range of wicked activities, including orgies where he used any woman he could get his hands on. An old friend and famous literary figure, Frank Harris, took him under his wing. Harris lived with a woman by the name of Nellie O'Hara. Now, Nellie had a friend in America called Pauline Pierce, who'd been born Pauline Robson, who was married to Marvin Pierce. Now, he was head of the McCall Corporation, a very, very powerful industrialist. And in early 1924, Pauline travelled to France to stay with her friend. And there it was. 4 individuals came together who never really should. Frank Harris, Nellie O'Hara, Pauline Pierce, and Aleister Crowley. Now, the year 1924 has a very special significance in Crowley chronology. According to his own diaries, during this period in Paris, Crowley went to create something that I think is a masterstroke for any red-blooded man. He created the supreme ordeal, linked with his realization, it was kind of like a challenge. How can you create the ultimate satanic thrill? And he said it was to attain the grade of ipsissimus, the highest magical achievement within his faith, within his belief system. Now, the exact nature of this ordeal remained mysterious because he didn't want anybody to find out what it really was. But a clue can be found in his description of the rite of eroto-comatose lucidity. A lot of big words, but we'll work about it together. First of all, the candidate, always a woman, is made ready for the ordeal by general athletic training and by feasting. I think most men would call that wining and dining. On the appointed day, he is attended by one or more chosen, experienced attendants whose duty it is to exhaust him sexually by every known means, and also to rouse him sexually by every known means. Every device and artifice of the courtesan is to be employed. That's every orifice to you. Every stimulant, every drug, every drink imaginable known to any physician on the planet has to be used. Nor should the attendants reck of danger. They've got to hunt down ruthlessly their appointed prey. Finally, the candidate will into a sleep of utter exhaustion resembling coma. And it is now that delicacy and skill must be exquisite. Let him be roused from his sleep by stimulation of a definitely and exclusively sexual type. Yet, if convenient, music, wisely regulated, will assist. So, you can attain this order 2 ways. By being a man who preys on a woman to help him reach that level of attainment. Or Or alternatively, you can be a woman who therefore goes to someone like Crowley or somebody else in the circle to exhaust them and attain the same gradings. It's immensely clever. It's bull, but it's immensely clever. So the attendants watch for signs of waking, and the moment anybody tries waking up, all stimulation must cease instantly, and the candidate be allowed to fall again into sleep. No sooner has this happened, do it again. And you keep going indefinitely until the candidate is in a state which is neither sleep nor awake, and in which his spirit, set free by perfect exhaustion of the body, and yet prevented from entering the city of sleep. Therefore, they commune with the Most High and Most Holy Lord God of its being, maker of heaven or earth. The ordeal terminates by failure, the occurrence of sleep invincible, or by success, in which ultimate waking is followed by a final performance of the sexual act. The initiate may then be allowed to sleep, or the practice may be renewed and persisted in until death ends all. The most favourable death is that occurring during the orgasm, and that is called mors justi. As it's written in his books, in his rituals, let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like his. If he did undergo this ordeal in 1924, we have to presume that the people that he did that with, including Nellie and Pauline, function as his assistants. Now, Pauline returned to America in early October 1924, and on June the 8th, 1925, not a year later, she gave birth to a girl named Barbara. Barbara Pierce married George Bush, who eventually became the 41st President of the United States. But who was Barbara's father? The chronology indicates that the only person, the only man to be with her around that time was Crowley or Marvin Pierce. The truth regarding Crowleyan sexual rituals is disclosed only to the highest initiates of the Otto in a document misleadingly titled Emblems and Modes of Use. So the question is Aleister Crowley the father of Barbara Bush? Even she might not know for certain. We have no way to prove it unless they allow us to take their DNA. However, more than one person has noticed the resemblance. And if you look on our website, you'll see pictures of Aleister Crowley and Barbara Bush side by side. I think you believe that the family resemblance is absolutely there to be seen. Many of you might recall the former First Lady's haughty and thoughtless remarks after the aftermath of the Katrina disaster.
What I'm hearing, which is sort of scary, is they all want to stay in Texas. Everybody is so overwhelmed by the hospitality. And so many of the people in the arenas here, you know, we're underprivileged anyway. This is working very well for them.
Those in the know were reminded of Aleister Crowley's similar reaction to the loss of life which occurred during the ascent of Kachinjunga, an expedition he commanded. This is precisely the sort of thing that which I have no sympathy whatsoever. That's cold. So it's possible that George W. Bush related to the world's most evil man. But we know for certain that on his father's side he is the 24th grandson of King Henry I, and King Henry VII was insane. This would make for an antichrist combination, as well as supporting the idea that select bloodlines control everything. President Bush is also supposed to be closely related to Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Colin Powell. I wouldn't be surprised if George W. Bush were closely related to John Kerry as well. Look at the photograph of Aleister Crowley. Power. And how you get it. the things you're prepared to do, do you think George W. Bush and his dad directly related to the most evil man on earth?
Barbara Pierce married George H.W. Bush, who eventually became the 41st President of the United States. And they had a son, George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States. Could the wickedest man in the world, Alistair Crowley, be George W. Bush's grandfather?
Pauline Pierce is Barbara Bush's mother. And you look at the picture, you know, and Barbara Bush looks very much like Alistair Crowley, and that would make George W. Bush the grandson of the beast. 666, and that's what Alistair Crowley called himself.
Finally, we recognize our last recipient, not simply for the years he spent as our 41st president. We honor George Herbert Walker Bush for service to America that spanned nearly 70 years.
Raise taxes and I'll say no, and they'll push and I'll say no, and they'll push again and I'll say to them, read my lips.
The remarkable Barbara Bush.
I would remind people that every single morning we all awaken to a safer, freer world because of George Bush.
George Bush, George W. Bush, son of President George Bush. Revenge is his and revenge is sweet. One of the closest elections in American history. Bush has won.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil.
At the southern point of Loch Ness, we're actually on it at the present moment, on this amazing sloop, the Nessie Hunter. And at the southern point of the loch, we can see, as we look ahead, Fort Augustus. Now, it was named after a famous Caesar, and yet it really pays testimony to the strength of the Scottish people. Back in AD 80, the Romans had sent thousands of their men deep into the wilderness of Scotland, and every single day they were under attack from the like of people that they'd never encountered before. I mean, imagine being the biggest army in the world, and yet suddenly you're face to face with people who just wouldn't surrender. And not only were the men prepared to fight for their land, the women were often bare-chested. They would charge at these highly equipped soldiers, carrying knives or rocks rather than give in. Malice of Macedonia wrote, I once picked up a 3-year-old child from the body of a vicious she-wolf that I had to keep smiting to end her. It took 11 thrusts to her chest to settle her. I picked up the boy who promptly attacked me, biting my cheek so badly that I could not eat for nigh a month. It seems these of the far north are warriors from birth. I ran him through, of course, and held him on my sword, where he remained crazed for almost 3 minutes, screaming and spitting at me. And well, the Picts and the Scots united against the Romans along Loch Ness at a place that I'm just looking at directly ahead. It just looks like a wilderness of trees, but it is just south of a town called Foyers. It was a bloody affair where 10,744 Scots died at the cost of 336 Romans. Tacitus walked over the battlefield and said to his advisors, they know we will defeat them, but they just keep coming over and over again. Many of the dead were hurled into pits on swampy ground near the loch, so that the earth would literally just swallow them to save them needing to be buried. Most Scots were not properly armed, and would fall to the heavily armed legions of Rome. Archers would claim the most, firing from beneath huge shield squares that deflected all of the arrows from the other side. Today here on the loch, there is a mist that falls so heavily and spreads over that side of the loch, and that is said to be the essence, the spirit of those gallant and brave Scots who were interred there. Their ghosts are regularly sighted here, often in the 15s and 20s. In 1998, a group of 32 scouts stayed nearby in a camp, and during the night, a group of full-bodied entities went through the camp. 4 children saw them and screamed. Others came out of their tents. They saw them too. 3 teachers clearly saw blood-covered figures. They got the children onto the bus, even though they were in their kind of nightwear, and drove them away into Fort Augustus for the night, returning the next day for their tents. And that's just one of thousands of sightings. Yet in the days after the battle, groups of a dozen or so Scots, too late for the battle, would race out of the undergrowth just to slit a Roman throat, stab one, or steal a weapon to fight back with. They were certain suicide missions, yet daily they knew a Roman would lose his life. As they walked through woods, archers would fire. During the night, a Scot would race into the camp to pour boiling pitch onto the fire, exploding it to set tents aflame. These early Scottish fighters were the ultimate guerrillas, prepared to lose their own lives and sacrifice themselves to make these supreme fighters from Rome think twice before settling here. Remember, these Romans had already conquered half the planet, facing violent enemies every step of the way. Yet they'd never encountered any crazier foe than the Scots. And as the main legions returned to English soil, day after day, more losses. Maybe not like in a major battle, but 478 soldiers killed to the loss of 200 Scots. Near Glencoe, a rockfall triggered by the Scots killed 38 soldiers and 5 horses. The Scots responsible just vanishing into the mist. In Appin, just south of Glencoe, 35 Roman soldiers decided to capture a group of 40 or so women for their pleasure. The women were incredibly calm and allowed the soldiers to have their way with them. However, by morning, all of the Romans were dead. After sex, the women had stabbed them, cutting off their genitals and shoving them into their mouths. In Killiecrankie, 11 soldiers who'd been hunting were found staked out on the ground and opened up. Their innards stretched over 20 yards from their bodies. It appeared they'd been captured, opened up while still alive, where the wild animals could literally eat them alive. Every trick to terrify was used by the Scots. On another occasion, the head of a Roman soldier was put into a water barrel, so they were drinking from it. Near Braemar, Scots were ordered to feed a legion. This they did by hacking a Roman soldier to death and cooking him to serve to all of his comrades. By the time they realised, once again, the Scots doing it were away in the forest. Right across the country, the Picts and Scots fought for every square inch of ground, eventually forcing the Romans to build the Antonine Wall. And on realising they couldn't defend that, Scots on both sides were still attacking them, then they built Hadrian's Wall, much further south. These maniac warriors had sacrificed themselves and in return won their freedom. And that, for every single Scottish soul, was one of the bravest things they could have done. They gave their lives to keep this a free land. Absolutely amazing it is too. Alan Robson with you, giving you a guided tour of a mystical and yet blood-soaked land. Beyond the monster. Destination Loch Ness.
Metro Radio.
Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
Alex Campbell's worked on the loch for 40 years.
My first sighting was in the month of May 1934. I was standing at the mouth of the River Oich, expecting a run of salmon to come in from Loch Ness. I was looking over towards the Abbey Boathouse. Flat, calm, beautiful sunshine, 8 o'clock in the morning. And without warning, this terrific upsurge of water, head, neck, and one sloping long hump. Well, I estimated the head at 6 feet above water level, roughly 200 yards distant, and the body I estimated at 30 feet because in my imagination I said to myself 2 15-foot boats stem to stern. That would be near enough at that distance. And the head was turning, very nervously. I could see, very nervously. And I wonder, oh dear, what's this? And I shut my eyes 3 times like that, just to make sure it wasn't imagination. No, it was still there. And then I realized why the nervous state it was in. I heard the engines of 2 small trawlers just leaving the bottom lock of the canal, coming down to enter Loch Ness, you see. And I said to myself, this is going to be interesting, because if the creature remains on the surface until the first trawler appears, its bow will come within my line of vision and its line of vision. And that's what happened. As soon as the bow of the first trawler came in sight, heavens, upstairs, fantastic. Well, I was absolutely, I wasn't scared, and I was just struck dumb, that if I had the finest camera in the world beside me, I couldn't have thought of picking it up, to take a picture. I was so staggered. Anyhow, I went home, looked up my book of prehistoric animals, and the nearest I could find in the book was a picture of the plesiosaur. But one thing I did make sure of, the colour of the skin, that particular occasion. I would say it was a slate grey. That was the first actually, and best sighting I had all down the years.
Now, I think a great many of you will recall when we were doing our Lake District special. We did a week from the Lake District visiting haunted castles, and one of the stories we told was Sir Donald Campbell and Bluebird, how, whilst trying to beat their water speed record, the Bluebird tipped upside down and claimed his life. Well, on Loch Ness, that we are overlooking right now, John Cobb managed to break the water speed record right here. And as he slowed down after breaking the record, thinking, well, nothing can go wrong now, he hit something. His craft hit what most people consider to be a wave, although at the time some people thought it could have been the back of some creature in the water. It cannoned out of control and John Cobb was dead. We've heard of Alistair Crowley's curse on Loch Ness. We add to that a second curse, the Cobb curse, the Cobb family curse, because they believed no matter how well John Cobb handled that ship, he was always destined to die. Have a listen.
John Cobb died on the waters of Loch Ness, fighting as always to win new glories for Britain. Only 2 days before, the Queen Mother went to meet the man we call the fastest man on Earth, who is now to become the fastest man on water for Britain. In his new jet boat, the Crusader, Cobb had already touched a high speed during trials, and there seemed no reason why yet another world speed record should not be his. Afternoon, on the day that was to be his last, Cobb took the Crusader along the measured mile again, faster and faster, until he was traveling at 240 miles an hour. And then... there, on the waters of Loch Ness, John Cobb was found. The glories that he had won during his lifetime were not for himself, but for his country. For John Cobb was, above all, a great Englishman.
We're told that this place holds curses, maybe. Well, let's add Mrs. Fensom's curse. And as you stare across the wondrous valley that houses Loch Ness, as the sun bleaches everything in sight, I think it would be really easy for you to think you're in Switzerland, or maybe the French Alps. Yet when the weather turns bad, winds up to 200 miles per hour, freezing sleet and snow, you can easily think that hell has paid you a visit. For years, in that Loch Ness, there really was a slumbering beast, just waiting to be found, lying there, unnoticed, in a quiet backwater of the loch. High up in the clouds, a plane struggling to battle through the thick snow, its landing gear freezing up, and the captain knew that something terrible was about to happen. When this Wellington bomber took off, the snow was already packed solid on the ground, yet still they were determined to take part in a routine training mission. As they sailed up into the air, they felt sure that the mild sprinkling of snow was certainly not going to hold them back. Yet on trying to return to the airbase, the captain knew there were a number of things going seriously wrong. One of the engines had failed. The plane was losing both height and speed, and the torrential blizzard was making instruments freeze, and the aircraft had no real idea where it was. I think if you are a pilot, you know when the plane is going down. So he ordered his men to bail out. Now the gunner was the first to leap out, and the others gazed in shock as his parachute just didn't open. So he fell and fell, finally smashing into the rocky crag and an instant death. 6 others landed safely in whiteout conditions, no one really sure whereabouts they were. The pilot and the co-pilot stayed on board as they were desperate not to let Arthur Robert to be lost, especially as Britain was so short of aircraft to face the Germans. This plane already had a great reputation. It was the veteran of 14 bombing raids across Germany, so the pilot needed to do everything he could to save her. Problem is, with the clouds so dense and so full of snow, it was impossible to see where you were going. And then, just for a split second, there was an ounce of clarity, and there, before them, the long stretching Loch Ness. The captain miraculously brought the plane gently down onto the loch, and before sinking, both pilots managed to paddle across to the shore on a small dinghy. And as they paddled away, the plane began to sink down into 250 feet of water. And for almost 40 years, there it remained, an ornament gracing Nessie's front room. And it wasn't until 1976 that a group of American marine biologists found it wedged deeply into the bed of the loch. It had to be recovered. Arthur Robert was the very last of 11,461 Wellingtons. So, a charitable trust began collecting money to try and recover it from the grimy, peat-soaked waters here in Loch Ness. The poor broken body of Sergeant John Stanley Fensom, the rear gunner, was found nearby, long dead. He would later be interred at Holy Trinity Church in Biscot Churchyard in Luton. However, many believe his spirit remains here at Loch Ness. There have been thousands of sightings across the surface of the loch. When the mist pours across the water, there's often a tall shape moving over that surface. Some swear it's the big long neck of the beastie, yet others swear that it's the body of the gunner returning to where his life suddenly ended. No one knows how that parachute never opened, yet locals know that the loch's cursed. On one occasion, a cousin of Sergeant Fensom visiting the loch claimed to have heard the man calling out through the fog. In 1975, Joseph Murray of Aberdeen hired a boat to fish the loch when a fierce mist rolled across the water and sat all around him. His story chilled everyone. He wrote, "It was like being snug in one huge pillow all around me. And yet 3 impossible things happened. I do not create stories. I'm an honest man, and I'll tell you all straight. First, as clear as day, I saw a man wearing a brown jacket with fur on the collar walk by the boat, walking across the surface of the water. I saw him so clearly, I called out and shouted for him to join me in the boat. About 2 minutes later, there was a huge hammering sound on the side of the boat, physically moving it sideways about 2 yards. And then Just as I decided to row back to shore, using my compass to guide me to the correct shore, just as I started rowing, I could see the lights of the town ahead of me. So I pointed the prow of the rowing boat that way, and as I reached the shore, I looked across at the loch, and I saw the airman walking across the water. I could make out his grey uniform. I saw his insignia, later identified to be that of a rear gunner, and also the kit that he carried, including an open face mask. I shouted at him, and he seemed not to hear me until I shouted, "Sergeant," rather loudly. And at that, the figure stopped. His face turned towards mine and actually gave me away. Now, could it be that after all the speculation, that the Loch Ness Monster is in fact a simple ghost gliding across the surface of the lake that would claim his aircraft? Is it his wife's curse that infests the place, adding its weight to that of the Satanist, Aleister Crowley? There's a lot going on right here. Alan Robson, live from Loch Ness.
Machines that set a standard that is far ahead of any of the world's aircraft. These are the first pictures ever to be taken of some of Britain's new hush-hush fighting machines. Machines that set a standard that is far ahead of any of the world's aircraft. Of the Vickers long-range bomber, we're not allowed as yet to give any details of performance. But we are able to say that under certain conditions it could fly non-stop for 8,000 miles. And its two 950 horsepower engines give it a top speed figure that, when it's actually published, will be amazing. But what impresses the watchers most is its uncanny silence.
Calling operation boom, Amber Mother landed 0426. No sign of any other aircraft about. Still no sign of Beaver Birdie. Over. Hello, Drew. Yes, they're all back now except Beaver Birdie.
From this and other operations, one of our aircraft is missing.
We've just been talking about that incredible story and the aeroplane in the loch. Well, it's not in the loch anymore. It's in the Brooklands Museum, and I'm very fortunate because on the end of the line we got Julian Temple, who's the general manager of museum operations. It sounds terribly military down there. Do you run them with an iron fist, Julian, do you?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No, I was the aviation curator here for 20 years and became general manager just fairly recently, but I'm also responsible for the site and the buildings as well as the collections now, so but I've been here just after the Wellington came back from Loch Ness, so I started working here. So
now, when you say the Wellington came back from Loch Ness, it makes it sound like the aeroplane was just stuck on the back of a big wagon and there it was in presentable form. Wasn't exactly that. What kind of state was it in?
Well, I think they used two big lorries. One was a big Queen Mary low loader, but it was a very much wreckage, really. But for most people's opinion, there was no, I suppose, there was obviously optimism about it being restored, but no guarantee it could be restored back to some of its former glory. But after many 100,000 man-hours of volunteers and 12 years, most of the work was done. So it's now on display.
Did this become a must put back to as near its original form because it was the last of the Wellingtons?
I think they were determined to do was not do what they'd done with a Halifax bomber at the RAF Museum a few years earlier in the 70s. They pulled one out of a lake in Norway and left it as found, really. And particularly with ex-aircrew involved here in this project, they were determined to make our Wellington look a bit more like it should do and stand on its undercarriage and at least be capable of being moved around in the hangar if necessary.
You say it's hard for anybody to understand. Here's an experienced flight crew, an experienced aeroplane. It had done an awful lot before it came to hit Loch Ness. Was it ever fully explained as to how come they had to ditch it there? Because, an experienced crew, even in bad weather, traditionally get to a landing strip.
Yeah, they were flying at night. It was New Year's Eve 1940 to 41, and they were on a training flight, but the crew would have been primarily trainees.
Oh, right.
And, it was a flying classroom, basically, with more personnel on it than would have been on a normal bomber mission. Obviously, the instructors and some of them would have been more experienced than others, but I think it was the engine failure in bad weather, and the only place they could see that was clear of mountains happened to be Loch Ness, which I believe the visibility perhaps was good enough to see the surface of the loch. So a ditching was the standard procedure at the time.
It was built in Brooklyn, so it's lovely that it's come back home.
Oh yeah, it came back to its home, its birthplace.
So, is there any truth in the fact that while the two lads were paddling back to the shore, that the monster dragged the plane under? Is that what happened to you?
I don't think I've heard that one. There's lots of, I'm sure, local legend and so on. Because in fact, when they found the aircraft, really looking for the Loch Ness, well into it was in 1976. They were looking with an American survey team, and they found it. I think it was Klein Associates from America were doing this sonar survey, and ultimately identified the aircraft with the help of a chap called Robin Holmes at Heriot-Watt University, and he was the driving force behind actually recovering it 9 years later.
Julian, thank you so much for having a chat with us. It's strange because while we're here on Loch Ness, it brings it home to you, I think, what it must have been like to come out of a bank of snow with gale force winds and just see this huge body of water in front of you. And I know pilots are trained for such things, but I think that's a bit of a bottle tester.
Oh yes, they could easily have drowned, I suppose, in the process, or not made a good landing to get out of it.
Oh, for sure. But Julian, lovely talking to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Good, thank you.
For weeks they searched, but yesterday this is where they found him. They vowed they wouldn't stop looking. It seems their perseverance has paid off.
The reaction, of course, is great sadness. So there is a slight relief in the fact remains have been found.
It's clearly a sad ending to this long search.
Metro Radio. Alan Robson. Live from Scotland.
We're on the road again. Kenny is travelling down alongside the darkened loch. We've got a place we have to be. But I think there's time for me to tell you about what happened back in the year 1297. The Scottish hero and warlord William Wallace, who Kenny and I researched. In fact, Kenny, in his regression back to a previous life, died fighting alongside the man, pretty much. Wallace defeated the English at Stirling, and suddenly all of England realised that they weren't as invincible as they thought they were. To a nation who believed themselves to be the greatest power on the planet, to be humbled by the uncivilised Scots was a major blow. Yet that victory also caused a major problem for the tiny village alongside Loch Ness of Drumnadrochit. A family called Murray, who were no friends of the Wallace, believed that the Scottish armies would be annihilated, so they decided to act on their best interest. Whilst all of the men of the town were away fighting, they began taking over. They butchered every boy child over the age of 3. They killed many of the women, usually after raping them. Bodies were stacked up at the loch side and burnt. The Murrays moved into the best homes and even began trading their stolen cattle, sheep, horses. Imagine just how they felt when word came through that Wallace had actually beaten the English, which means the land grabbers decided that they had no choice but to defend what they had procured. They didn't expect the men to be coming back, but they were, and they would not be happy. So as these brave Scots began returning home to Drumnadrochit in 2s and 3s, they were ambushed and slain, until one of Wallace's generals sent a rider to call their men to arms again as the English were regrouping against them. And on getting to the town, he found that none of his fighters were there. On his way out of town, thinking that the men must already be on their way back to the fight, a woman from a local cottage stopped him to tell him what the Murrays were doing. Legend has it that Wallace himself ordered that justice must befall them. And although he needed every man at his disposal, he sent 100 warriors to put right the Orphy Rang. It was around this time of night when most of the Murray clan were either drunk, in bed with the women they'd enslaved, or feasting, that the men from Wallace decided to swoop. One building at a time, the warriors surrounded it, climbing in through windows or walking in open doors to slit the throats of every man they found. To their surprise, some women tried to attack them, and they were swiftly dispatched too. Finally, all that remained was the big house overlooking the loch, where Kenneth Murray was the new self-proclaimed laird. The warriors literally hacked their way through his family and also through his men to get to his bedroom, where they found him unconscious with a drink. The following morning he awoke to find himself tied to a tree next to the loch. He shouted, "Someone will die for this!" And on hearing it, Duncan Campbell strode forward, carrying a small bundle. He opened it up and thrust it in the face of his captive. It was the blackened body of his own baby son, found in the ashen remains of a bonfire where the dead and living had perished. "Aye, someone will be dying today," said Campbell. "Would you hazard a guess as to who, you murdering bastard?" It took Murray almost 12 days to die, and he begged them to kill him almost daily. Those that witnessed his slow torture would spread such a fear around that no one would ever try and steal the land of any fighting Scot again. They started with his hands and feet, tearing off his fingernails, then salting the open wounds. Then his toenails, then crushing his toes with hammers, shattering the ankles, and then one by one cutting his toes off. They stripped off his flesh, cut off his feet, and sealed the wound with burning tar. All was enough to just keep him alive. By the 11th day, Murray was a torso, arms and legs cut off, penis and testicles nailed to the post that he was tied to. His eyes had been roughly gouged out. His nose was merely a gaping hole in the centre of his head. His tongue had been cut out. His ears had been clipped. All of his hair had been burnt from his head, and the only noise he could make was a wheezing gasp that seemed to bubble and froth at the side of his mouth. On the ground next to his body lay the teeth that had been torn out, his mashed and bleeding gums. Many of the women of the town, some of whom he'd raped, had urinated and defecated on him. So he was an insect's perfect buffet. On the morning of the 12th day, to everybody's surprise, Murray was still alive, in a fashion. Campbell then started placing kindling around his butchered carcass, and although he couldn't see it, he knew what was about to happen. He began to howl in this eerie, distorted voice coming from deep within his evil soul. A scream so loud and so filled with terror that they said, "Even the English will hear what happens to those who seek to steal our land." The flame was put to it, and Murray howled as what little flesh he had left began to burn and crackle. To this day, people have heard this banshee-like howl late at night as Murray screams throughout eternity for the murdering of the innocent ones. And when you stand next to this awesome loch, looking more like an inland sea, you half expect to hear it. So when people say there's just a monster to see at Loch Ness, there's so much more. Driving at this time of night, Kenny and I share one thing in common. We love driving at night, and yet there's certain places down here that you get that kind of chill, don't you?
You really do. When you come to these really narrow roads and stuff as well, and you're looking, you're thinking, where the hell are we heading? And you think, there must be something at the end of this, but it's very scary and very worrying.
Well, as we're on our way, there's just a sign in front of us saying, Clava Cairns. So let's follow along this road. Thank you for coming out with us this time of night. We are not very far from the main body of water here in Loch Ness. We're just stopping at a crossroads where directly in front of us there's a couple of white stone-built cottages called Claver Lodge. They're actually holiday homes that some people are using. Claver Cairns is down here somewhere. Now, they're supposed to be standing stones and also burial mounds for numerous people, and they're supposed to also carry a curse, but Richard is kind of hunting. It's the site of an exceptionally well-preserved group of the burial cairns built around 4,000 years ago. We're talking 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. It's a Bronze Age cemetery complex, and it's got passage graves, ring cairns, curb cairns, standing stones in a beautiful setting, and the remains of a chapel of unknown date. Richard standing outside, wind the window down. I think it's straight down there. I think it's straight down, Richard. Dive in the car, let's head down there right now. And my apologies to you. We knew roughly where a lot of these things were. We want to be able to get to them very, very quickly. It's only about a mile and a half. Kenny is reversing back. We got this huge truck that has a strange smell of wee in it today. I don't know why. Kenny, have you wet yourself?
Not today.
Okay. Which means that we're smelling actually old wee from previous days, which isn't the best of it. So we're reversing back up to try and find out where these Claver cairns are, and I'm guessing that they're straight down, because to the sides we have those National Trust lodges. So just in front of us in the red kind of Audi car, we got Richard R. Buffin, who's taking point, and we are just kind of heading down there now. You know, we talk about things from about 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago, and we talk about it like it's ancient history. Oh, now that's interesting. Just as we move down, we've come to a field, and the sky is very, very dark, and yet I just managed to catch the silhouettes of two really quite large horses over there. Farms to the right-hand side as well, with tractors and huge hay bales, and just losing the rear lights, just coming on from time to time as Richard ahead of us starts to break a little bit. It's pitch black, and when you're going down these little tiny avenues, you're never sure whether you're on the right road or not. In a field just to the left-hand side, as we were making our way down here, there were strange sculptures. I don't know whether you saw them as well, but they were just kind of poking through the land, and one looked like there's one of the tributaries of the river Ness is on our right-hand side now. I think we're going to be crossing a small bridge, and a weak bridge, it says. That's not what you want to hear when you're in a truck as big as here. We're good over it, and we are off the weak bridge, and there's a rather large aqueduct to the left-hand side. Looks to be carrying maybe railway coaches. We're passing Claver Lodge. I think we have found Claver cairns. Turning to the right-hand side, there is nothing on these roads. Half a mile. Absolutely nothing on these roads at all. We're only down here for about 3 days in total, and yet we're seeing so much. Pulling up the car park to our right-hand side, there seems to be a taxi there, so somebody's obviously either took a taxi and asked the guy to wait. But here they are, the Claver cairns, the burial mounds, and it's one of those car parks where they've sunk wooden staves into the ground, which means we never fit these suckers into it. Now this is spooky, so let's get out, have a quick look at these. Got so many stories to tell you tonight, but Claver cairns. Let's step out of the vehicle and get this done. Whoa, this time of night you got to be extra careful, and again you can hear absolutely nothing apart from us getting out here. There's the bolt. There we go. We're in. And directly ahead of us, I'm seeing white birds flying over graves, which is quite an odd thing. And there are the standing stones now. Now we're hitting my faith, the pagans, because we're going back 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. These things were built. Standing stones quite often for ceremony, and yet I think if you had your astronomical hat on, you would find that each standing stone was a precise distance apart and usually synonymous with matching up with stars or other planets. They're around most of the mounds. Absolutely incredible. We'll try and come back tomorrow to get some pictures during the day of these, because this time of night the greyness of them just seems to climb out of the ground. Now we should be able to get into some of these tunnels, and I warn you that there's a wagon just going by, like a big farm truck behind us. Those of you who are maybe frightened of ghosts or frightened of spirits will not be pleased by the idea that there are tunnels. Hopefully we'll be able to climb about in some of these. Let's have a look. The clava cairns. I think we're coming to the main doorway here. Yes, we are. And this one hasn't got a roof on it, which is all right. So you can actually make your way down. You can imagine it with a roof on, and directly under our feet here, cairns, you will find that one or two things happened in a place like this. Either they dug a pit in the centre where they would rest the remains, or the grave would be here. Alternatively, on some of these, you would have quite a high cairn. I think a lot of the stones being stolen from these to help build farmhouses and cottages and similar things in the past. But when they had a complete cover, a complete shroud over it, you will see that they had the tunnel coming in. That would have had a roof on it, as would this, and there would be a tiny little gap, usually pointing at a star. So it could be directly above us, or it would be where the sun perhaps travels across, so that at a particular time of day the sun would shine down that tiny little hole to illuminate the inside of the cairn, as if to pay tribute to the people who died, who were placed in here. Sometimes they were burnt. I mean, even back then, 2,000 years BC, they were burnt and placed in pots, and the pot would usually be placed in a little hole in the, literally a hole in the wall. Now, it actually looks like it could have been there, because that looks like it's been filled up. I mean, a lot of these would have been robbed. They wouldn't have had grave goods or things that, like the Vikings. Some people have been buried with longboats. Certainly Romans and stuff buried with spears and chariots and their favourite horses at times, like going throughout history. But if you go back before that, they weren't particularly buried with anything that they believed would help them in the next life. They knew their spirit was moving on. They weren't particularly convinced that they'd be able to take all of their possessions. The standing stones are absolutely beautiful, and as I say, they're positioned most likely to be matching with the stars, and they're all along. Every burial mound has standing stones around them. Kenny seems to have found a little something. What is it that you've got there, Ken? Read it out.
It actually gives you a whole description of what it is. It's a passage grave,
right?
Apparently, so that obviously it is burial chambers underneath these stones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Covered by lintels, they're so low you'd have to crawl along it. That's why I was saying that there was like a lid on it, but I think a lot of it's been robbed, because you know how the Roman wall, Hadrian's wall and the Antonine wall in Scotland and the north of England was robbed by farmers, because why carve stone and carry it all that distance when there's a big burial mound loaded full of stones? So I'm going to just have a look at this next burial mound over here. Some of the standing stones are much, much bigger. Usually the bigger the standing stones, the more important the people that were buried there. But I'm noticing, cutting through the grass beneath our feet, there's smaller stones that would either have been, because if you look at it, there's another circle here. Do you see it? Circle round there as well. So I think you have to realise that an awful lot of these have been robbed. And if you look down there, there's like a a depression. Now, I'm fairly sure that in its time, there will have been something down here too. Looks like it doesn't, maybe it's even here. Depressions in the earth usually means people have been digging for something, and there's the remnants of burial mound kind of bursting through grass and moss beneath our feet. So, you know, we talk about being a little bit frightened of ghosts and spirits. I would have thought that a place like this, where people have robbed your grave, where people have desecrated it by scattering it in all directions or taking a lid off it, like they have, talk about a good reason to be cursed. And look at this, the standing stones here obviously are a very, very decent size. I think to move something like this would take 20 or 30 men to carry that, because that standing stone that's directly ahead of us that has a shape to it, it's obviously been carved, but secondly, it's huge, which means that whoever went into this grave was probably someone who was quite a man. But again, you would not be able to walk in as we've been able to do. You would have to crawl along a small tunnel, and as I say, the lid on the top lit up at a certain time of day when the sun would get to a particular place in the sky, and they just keep going. There's more directly ahead, but I'm more fascinated by what's not here anymore. It's an amazing place. Clava Cairns. We're going to head back into the car. I've got another curse to tell you about, and it's a maritime one from a guy who died thousands of miles away. Why would this part of the world be the place that Blackbeard, the pirate, would curse? You're going to find that out next. But we're getting closer every second to facing the beastie.
Well, I didn't see it at first. Someone else saw it, so it drew my attention and said, "Oh, look, there's the monster."
It was about midday, and we were in the middle of the loch in the bay, and we looked out down the loch, and about 500, 600 yards away, we saw this shape. It was a hump moving in the water. And at first we just treated it as a joke, and, well, somebody said it was the monster, but we didn't take it seriously for the first couple of seconds. And then people began to look at it more closely. Looking at the loch against the water, it was just a black form going across. And it was moving very fast across the loch towards the other side. And it turned back just when we got to the other side and started to go back again, and it submerged. There was a hell of a wake of it.
You can sort of see the bow waves coming off the front. Only the pretty big waves and the wash. It spread from one side of the loch to the other side.
All I can say really recognised the speed impressed me very much.
It really was moving.
It would have had to be in a speedboat if it was anything to go as fast as it.
You could see a Cali cruiser in the distance. It was really leaving behind.
The fact that the people in the Cali cruiser had seen it as well confirmed it, really, in my mind. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been so confident about it.
Metro Radio.
Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
Alan Robson. The present moment we are travelling down the western side of Loch Ness, and there's a few seagulls flying over it. The sun is shining here. In between mountains, you get this strange warm weather, and it might be freezing either side of the hills, and yet down here, along the side of the loch, you can't help but think that you're in somewhere like Lake Garda in Switzerland, or Italy, Lake Como. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, and there's lots of boats on it, and it sparkles. But the one thing that keeps sucking your eyes back to that loch is, especially when you're driving kind of level with it, at any moment maybe a little head could just pop up there. Jenny's laughing because he's thinking, I wasn't talking about that kind of head, like some kind of semi-naked skin dive or anything. You just can't help looking for Nessie, and there's a very large black dog pooing on the grass, and I bet he's not going to pick that up. Hang on a second, wait a minute. Stinky Hoose! There you go. Frankly, that's him telt. But I got a story about the Celtic princess that I want to share with you, because there's so many really cool tales up here. Whilst the Romans were having like this major impact in England, bringing roads and flushing toilets and plumbing and a degree of civilization. Look, what's that over there? Look, over there, what's that? What's that? There's Loch Ness. Look, directly across. There's something sticking out of the water. What is it? It's a buoy.
It's a buoy.
What, like a buoy?
It's a blue buoy.
No, is it a buoy?
I think it's a buoy.
Yeah. Or a shark. Now then we get covered by trees and we can't see the loch just briefly. But anyway, north of England, Romans everywhere. You know, we got Hadrian's Wall, we got it guarded, letting people in and out. And the Scots decided they weren't going to accept the Roman interference at any level at all. As we say, Hadrian built his wall. Another emperor, Antonius, managed to advance a further 80 miles north, and he built a wall 37 miles long, the Antonine Wall. It was built of turf on a stone base using slave labour in only a year. And for a while the Romans proclaimed victory over the Scots. They even had a coin minted showing Britannia under the heel of Rome, and that was in the year 143. Yet it could never be protected whilst you were surrounded on both sides of the wall by marauding tribes determined to get shot of the Romans. The last straw was said to have taken place on the Battle of the Banks of Loch Ness. Now, long before there was any talk of the monster, 2 Roman legions were said to have been travelling across the countryside to intimidate the various small settlements and put down any sign of rebellion. But then there weren't many towns, let alone cities, but there were a number of tribal settlements right the way along the banks of this loch. Places that are now named after the Romans. Fort Augustus, named after the Roman ruler Lewiston. Abrachian, Fovers, Loch End and Invermoriston. So the Romans had worked their way right around the loch, putting men to the sword, bribing some women to follow them to entertain the troops. The wall had been attacked over and over again, and numbers of soldiers had been sent to call back the 2 legions. But on foot, it had taken them weeks, you can imagine, to get all the way up here to the loch. And on getting here, they found themselves surrounded by a pack of tribesmen who hacked them to death and strung them up and then used them for target practice with bows, spears, and they were deadly with slingshots. I know in the Bible there's lots of stories of people there and knocking down Philistines with slingshots. Here, in Loch Ness, the semi-naked blue-painted Picts and the Scottish tribes were deadly with them too. Imagine you've got something that's less directional than a catapult, but you could kill a running rabbit from something like 50, 60 yards. I mean, we're talking fairly spectacular hunters here. So they were still camped at the lochside when the Roman legions returned, and on seeing their men swinging in the chill breeze, they attacked the tribesmen, killed them all. They hadn't realised that the leader of the band was the son of the most powerful woman in that part of Scotland. Now, the name of the woman seems to be lost in the dust of time, but she had been the wife of a Chancleef. A Chancleef? What is a Chancleef? You mean a clan chief? I think a clan chief is probably where we were going with that. What is a Chancleef? Sorry, everybody. There you go. She was the wife of a Chancleef. At least I've done it again. No! I've got a mental block now.
It's the monster.
It is. I'm being hypnotised by Nessie. I keep looking at the loch and it is absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, she had been the wife of
a clan chief.
That's right. How did you know? And on his death, usually what happens is that, like, a son would take over, you know, like in any kind of big business. But back then, this woman had so much power, she decided that she was going to take over the clan. And she had to take over her husband's brother in a sword fight before she could claim it. So she actually went hand-to-hand combat with her husband's brother, and she decapitated him with her sword. Now, although she was technically a queen to her people, the name that she's described of in all of the historical writings that I managed to find was the Princess of the Celts. And on hearing that her only son was dead, and knowing that her family line had, in effect, just there, been snuffed out, she became enraged, and she ordered that all of the tribes from around the loch be gathered to avenge the death. The soldiers from the Antonine Wall, who thought they were just about to be slaughtered, suddenly watched as the encampments of attackers just disappeared overnight. Well, the Roman legions were fairly satisfied how their mission had gone. They hadn't lost a single man. They were about to rejoin all of their mates at the wall when in the middle of the night, darkness seemed to come to life. They stared into the tree line that's to my right-hand side, climbing right the way up the hill. They stared into it, and it all seemed to move. Even then, this area had said to have been where the spirits of the woods danced at night. Yet this time it was thousands of Scots covered in dirt, their eyes gleaming with murderous intent, when through the crowd of basic wild humanity walked this woman wearing a long gown that seemed to just shimmer in the moonlight. She stepped out into the middle of the open ground, and the commander stepped forward to discuss terms. The Roman, who could see he was impossibly outnumbered, offered his surrender. And the princess said, "I'm afraid that is not acceptable." And the Roman asked what would be acceptable. And this little tiny woman, she said, "When the water of the loch is red with your blood." Oh, at this, she thrust a dagger into his throat, and he hung onto it until she let him slide off the blade. The Roman soldiers who surrounded her seemed to be caught in complete shock. They could easily have killed her, yet by the time they'd regained their composure, all of the other Scots were upon them. They forced them back into the loch, where their armour was a major disadvantage. Some drowned under the weight of it. The rest were literally cut to pieces. The aftermath of the battle was said to be the most horrific sight imaginable. Human arms, legs, and heads floating along the surface of crimson water. In the moonlight, it did indeed look as if the entire loch was filled with blood. The Scots rallied to pay tribute to their princess, but she was nowhere to be found. Her dress was found by the loch completely unmarked, as if she'd slipped it off to swim in the blood of her enemies. And she was never seen again. She was never seen again then. Yet she is seen here now. They say her spirit moves over the waters of Loch Ness to protect the land from those who would seek to take it. For almost 300 years, people have come here and seen this white, glowing, shimmering, shadowy woman gliding across the surface of Loch Ness in the late evening mist. Others have said that they have seen the spirits of Romans rising up out of the water and sweeping across this incredible loch. Directly across to the left-hand side is Urquhart Castle, just sticking out on a promontory as we head for our next adventure. We keep asking the question of what could the Loch Ness Monster be? If you saw something long and tall gliding across the surface of the water, maybe the shape of that woman. From a distance, could that look like the neck of some creature left trapped in a loch since prehistoric days? Could the Loch Ness Monster, in effect, be the spirits of the dead rising from the water in the form of darkened shadows? The story that I have to tell you involves the part of Inverness that I'm at now. Now, for those of you that managed to come up here, the River Ness wallops through the centre of Inverness, and of course it leads all the way down to the edge of Loch Ness. And it may well be that whatever, and we've looked long and hard, and I have floated cold and soft underneath the water of Loch Ness in search of any monster, but it may well be that if anything did come in, it came in from the sea down this waterway that's on my right-hand side. It's fast-flowing, not making a whole lot of noise, it has to be said, for the gallonage of water that's in there. However, it sweeps right away down ahead of us. There's islands in the middle of the river. It's a beautiful, beautiful walk. The later in the night you leave it. And yet, in the 1600s and 1700s, the area around Inverness was infamous for covens of witches. They were in every village, and certainly in every town. But the witch here that was most feared was known as Eliza, a dark-eyed woman with teeth worn down to blackened stumps. Her skin was pale and white, prone to peeling if ever she dared walk out in the sun. This woman's place was in darkness. This was a power. When darkness reigned, so did she, terrorizing the locals and exacting from them whatever she wanted as a price for leaving them alone. It's said that Eliza could make sheep miscarry, cause cattle to perish, and even make infants die in their cots. Those that were cursed by her almost certainly met with disaster. It's thought that in some quarters that far from being anything like a mystic, she was in fact just a clever murderess who employed members of the coven to do whatever deeds she fancied. When she cursed a family, saying the youngest child would die, one of her witches would creep into their home and smother the baby with a pillow. The following morning, nothing could be proven other than that another of Eliza's curses had worked. After over 30 years of living in fear, the people around Inverness decided to seek help from a white witch who lived in Blackadder, which is further south from here, in fact closer to Coldstream, a long, long way away. This goodly witch told them that the only way to break the spell of a black witch was to draw blood from her face anywhere above the breath. Now, the breath is above mouth level, so that would mean to cut them across the brow, cut them across the nose, cut them across the cheek. And this was a time when things were about to get extremely nasty. Each time a local was cursed by one of Eliza's henchwomen, they would pull out a knife and slash their faces. There's several cases of people being indicted with this crime, and in each case their excuse was that they were merely trying to break free of a spell. Now, Eliza realized that her power was waning, despite over the years killing thousands of animals and hundreds of young children in the areas around Inverness. This made the head witch seek out the woman who had led to her destruction. And both she and her coven of over 40 witches headed south to Blackadder to confront the White Witch. They would kill her and carry her body through the villages as a warning to the locals not to dare mess with her again. However, she got rather more than she bargained for. Eliza was not a witch. She merely called herself so. She ruled by fear. Her fellow witches were not witches either. They had no power. They were nothing but murderesses. They presumed that the White Witch was a charlatan. But history dictates that that was not the case. The White Witch of Blackadder was known as Sissy, a lady in her 40s who could mix up potions to cure bellyache, gout, or infertility. She could cure animals and birds and had never been known to harm a living soul. However, she was about to start. On finding her small thatched cottage on the southern outskirts of Blackadder, the witches surrounded their house, hurling burning tapers onto it, setting it ablaze. Within seconds, the house was an inferno, yet still Sissy refused to leave. It took almost 4 hours for that cottage to burn to the ground. As the witches danced about, drinking, laughing, and even cooking the White Witch's chickens in the heat, they were reveling in a victory that they hadn't had yet. When from the ashes of that burning house, out stepped Sissy, completely unharmed. She crossed her arms and suddenly from the remnants of her home burning, sparks filled the sky each one landing on a witch who had thrown a taper, and each woman began to burn. And yet no matter how hard the witches tried to cast them away, the tapers remained firmly affixed in the same way that iron filings are solidly affixed to a magnet. All but 6 of the so-called witches were dead. Eliza ordered the others to kill the White Witch. They were far less than enthusiastic, having seen so many of the coven incinerated. Even so, some grasping knives, others clubs, they rushed at Sissy, who stood her ground. And as the blows rained down, she merely smiled. Each blade point was unable to get any nearer than an inch from her body. She pursed her lips and blew, and each club began to batter the person carrying it. Each blade was pushed into the body of its murderous host. So there they stood, the power of good and the very essence of evil. Eliza declared that she knew what the witch's power was. "Ye cannot harm me, but you can make me hurt myself if I were to attack you, so I won't, and then there's nought you can do." Eliza was actually right, because the White Witch could only return any assault backwards on an assailant. So Eliza began walking away. At this, the White Witch picked up a pitchfork and walked slowly behind her. She heard Eliza laughing, saying, "Your magic can't harm me now." She heard the White Witch walking behind her, and on spinning round, she barely had time to register the picture when Sissy rammed the fork into her stomach and began to twist it. "This is not magic," said Sissy. "This is justice. I'd kill ye as I'd kill a snake." Eliza couldn't speak. The sparkle in her eyes merely began to fade, and her life melted away. It's believed that her body was hurled into the River Ness at this precise spot. There's a mark on the railing here that some other witch has obviously carved in. As a tribute, I choose to believe, for Sissy, who, had she been left alone, would have caused no problem to anybody. Least of all Eliza, who was all of these miles further north. However, her body was brought back to be dumped like garbage in the river that rolled through the town that she had complete control of for a little while. But fate and justice, like karma, just has a way of eventually coming around. Alan Robson live from Inverness, going beyond the monster.
Metro Radio. Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
Now, a bit earlier I was teasing you about Blackbeard. Well, how unlikely does it sound that Loch Ness could possibly be cursed by the world's most infamous pirate? Well, in 2006, a team of marine archaeologists uncovered the remnants of the sloop that Blackbeard was on when he died. It's called the Queen Anne's Revenge, and it was located in relatively shallow water off the coast of North Carolina in the United States of America. Now, the team there found cannons, bells, lead shot of all sizes. They found bags of gold dust, pewter crockery, and medical devices like urethral syringes to treat syphilis with mercury. You've had that, Kenny?
Thanks.
It's a sore point. This was Edward Teach's final ship, Blackbeard, the most feared pirate of all time. And they found writings on board that confirmed that he would light red-hot tapers into his hair, going into battle with his head literally on fire. Blackbeard was married at least 14 times, and he began his piratical exploits indirectly, legally, as a privateer for England. Yet the end of him came when troops loaded on board a trio of ships to track him, then exterminate him. Blackbeard had told everybody that he'd retired, but the governor of Virginia didn't believe him, so in an attempt to make a name for himself, the governor decided he would be the man who defeated and killed Blackbeard. Troops started gathering. Captain Maynard found himself in pitched battle with Blackbeard. Teach slashed his fingers, yet bravely the Englishman kept fighting, drawing a pistol and shooting the pirate in the chest. Then stepped forward a Highlander. Some claimed that his name was Buchan, who stood in front of his wounded captain, and during the sword fight, he slashed Blackbeard's throat. The pirate looked at him and said, "Well done, lad." Some say that they actually chatted throughout the fight, flattering each other or trying to intimidate. Teach said, "If I kill you today, you'll be going straight to hell with all of your skippers' backstabbing brigade." In return, the Highlander said, "Nay, hell is waiting for ye." Then a second time, the Highlander slashed the pirate's throat, this time making it spurt with blood. Maynard wrote in his report, "The huge pirate smiled at this brave young lad and seemed truly proud of his courage. Then said, 'Well, matey, it's time for me to go. You've bettered me, and yet both you and the land you're from will be cursed for all time. For this one time, your foe is innocent, and therefore your final blow shall be heinous.'" Blackbeard, Edward Teach, then began laughing and lowered his guard. At that, the young Scot hacked at his throat, taking off his head as it lay flat on his shoulder, held on by a strip of flesh. He finished severing it and threw Blackbeard's body into the sea, placing his head on a spike for all to see. It was said that the curse given at the moment of his death holds a great deal of power, and young Buchan returned to his home alongside this loch, Loch Ness. Within that year, his sweetheart died of pneumonia. Both his parents, too. His best friend drowned in the loch. Buchan walked to a tree 8 paces from his small cottage and hanged himself in an attempt to end the curse and to join Edward Teach in hell. The curse still stands, and no one knows who, where, or when it'll strike next. I hope it's not me.
The Grant family of Invermorston.
I saw the Loch Ness Monster last October. I was upstairs. It was a moonlight night, and it was one of those nights when you got every colour, orange, red, yellow, all the colours that you possibly get. And I suddenly saw this black thing in the middle of the water out there, and it was just a big black mound actually, and it suddenly sort of turned and went just straight over and into the water again. By the time I shouted for my husband, it's gone, of course. But it was rather, to my mind, in shape, rather like a seal, that sort of big, shiny black back to it. Well, I couldn't really tell you the size because, I'm a good way away from it here, but it was in the upstairs bedroom window and I saw it. And this lights on the water, it was just fantastic. And you just saw it just lying on the water, just turned, as I've said to many people, as a cat sitting on your knee. When it started sitting there, it twists and away over, and it just somersaulted back into the water like that. But it was must have been terrific size, because to see it from here to there, you got the idea of it from that side. So to me, it was an enormous seal. It's part of us, the monster. It's just like one in the family, actually. We know it's there because it belongs to the loch and belongs to us in the glen. It's been there for years and years and years. My husband's grandfather used to call it a beastie. So, it's not new. It's only just new now because, there's been this fuss made about it. But it was exactly as I imagined it was going to be. It wasn't anything different. I've stood there many, many nights waiting for it to happen, but when it did actually happen, I wasn't worried, I wasn't frightened or anything. I knew it was just our Nessie.
Still pounding round the lake. We always have so much to do when we have trips like this. And we've got to be in a certain place at a certain time to make sure we get everything in. for you guys. And yet, when people talk about spotting the Loch Ness Monster, so many stories, and the people who are telling those stories are genuine and sincere people. You know, they're not crazies, they're not half drunk, they're reliable witnesses. Loch Ness has enough myths and legends attached to it, yet there's one about a castle on the loch side. There's a few to choose from, and yet this particular castle's never been named. Goes back to the early 1800s when a young lad from a poor family fell in love with the daughter of the laird. The relationship never set to work, the laird setting his dogs on the boy and throwing his family out of their tied cottage. The young man was in love, though, and ignoring his parents' pleadings, was determined to steal her away. Now, the laird knew this and declared that he would put a price on the man's head. Well, she kept meeting him in secret in this ruined castle, and it became a place where they could love one another and be free of prying eyes. The secret rendezvous was a joyous one. She truly loved him, and he really loved her. They were kindred spirits, neither of them understanding how anybody could be against such a wondrous and true love. They talked together, held each other, made love. The castle may be a ruin, yet to them it was more special than any gold-laden palace. The idyll was soon shattered after the suspicious father had her followed, and his man saw everything. The following day, the laird kept his daughter captive and sent 2 of his men to wait for him at the castle. They captured him, and he begged them for mercy, saying that they might as well cut out his heart rather than stop him seeing his beloved girl. So they did that. They cut out his heart. They returned to the laird with a man's heart in a blood-sodden rag to claim their bounty. His daughter exploded into a rage and ran from the house, racing to the castle to find nothing other than a pool of blood. So much that she knew that her dear, loving man was certainly dead. When his daughter didn't return home, the laird sent out search parties, but she was never found. A letter was left in the castle saying, "You did this, but you will never stop us being together." Some say that she hanged herself from the roof of the crumbling building, being cut down by her friends and buried away from her father. Yet others say that she found the pit where her man was hurled, and she climbed into it, pulling stones and earth down on top of herself, slicing open her veins and bleeding to death, whilst holding on to her one and only true love. And they say that if you share a kiss in the castle, you feel a rush of passion from the spirits of the 2 lovers trapped forever in their own eternal love nest. But there's so many stories linked with this of people saying. In 1882, Mac and Marie Dugdale picnicking next to the castle and saw 2 young people running around, yet they appeared to be in old-fashioned clothing. They wrote, "They both seemed so happy, laughing and giggling. Then they settled down by the loch and began to make love. I was shocked, and I told my husband to announce our presence and demand they show rather more decorum. He stood up and walked over, and we both saw them disappear right in front of us. The Dugdales had no idea about the 2 lovers. They'd never heard the legend." In 1972, a man called Aitken was alone in the castle when he felt someone kiss his cheek. "I'm not imagining it. My cheek was even moist from it. I suddenly felt like I wanted to cry, and to be honest, I did a little. I felt so sad. I'd lost my wife 5 months earlier, but was not even thinking of her when this happened. It was as if someone wanted to sympathize, and it was the first kiss I'd had since she passed." In July 75, a holidaymaker actually had a chat with 2 young people, they said in fancy dress, with very broad Scottish accents, sitting near the loch near an old castle. His name was Oliver Taylor from Manchester, on holiday with his old parents. He'd gone out for a walk and bumped into a couple and spoke how beautiful the loch had looked. The couple smiled and cuddled each other. The girl walked up to him and stroked his arm, reaching over to kiss his cheek. And at that, the pair of them turned towards the castle and walked through the wall. Taylor told the evening newspaper, "I hadn't been drinking. They just melted through the wall. I could still feel the kiss on my cheek. Her lips and hand had felt as solid as you or I. Never believed in ghosts, so if they were real people, where the F were they? In 2003, a group of cyclists stopped near Loch Ness after pedalling from Inverness. All 27 of them saw two ghosts gliding over the waters of the loch, a man and woman in a long grey dress. Elizabeth Burgess said, "At first I thought it was the necks of two monsters. We're raised with these stories. But we could make out it was actually the shape of two people. You could clearly see arms and legs. They were holding hands, and it looked really sweet. As we looked closer, they were about a foot above the water. Then there was a water splash. They were gone. We all saw it. Most of us hadn't seen a ghost before. Some refused to believe it. But we all know what we saw." In my mouth, because tonight I'm aiming to go face to face with the Loch Ness Monster. Richard's car has just pulled in to the boatyard. The loch is directly ahead of us. I can see a white vessel, and we are pulling up right now. There's a certain suit waiting for me. I'm going into the loch tonight. It's late, it's dark. I've got to get some kit on. Join me in my kit room. Gina's actually helping me rig with this very, very peculiar suit that I have to wear for what we're doing next. You'll find out about that soon. But I just thought, we've been here now for about 3.5, 4 days. This is our final day and our final challenge to come. What is the monster? Because I think what we have to realise is, across this week, we have been baiting traps along the riverbank. You know, you never know your luck. What have we caught? We caught a few fish. We've caught a few eels. We've caught quite a large catfish. However, what is the monster? What's big enough for all of these people who've taken photographs, who've filmed the loch? So much evidence here. It's hard to believe when you just look at half a dozen YouTube clips. There's millions of YouTube clips, far too many. And yes, there have been a few people on the loch winding folk up with remote control this and remote control that. But go back long before that, when people just had the old cine cameras. Hundreds of them. Hundreds show the monster. We've got people like professional police officers, members of the military, bumping into the monster in his rowing boat right in the centre of the loch. There's a lot of proof here. Sharks, I think, the way that sharks behave, and you'll be aware yourself that a lot of people would see the fin on the water, the way they feed and the way they round up shoals of fish, those kind of things would easily be seen, I reckon, certainly by the kind of cameras that have trawled this loch left, right and centre. But on saying that, there have been sharks in lochs. Think outside the box though. What other kind of creatures, realistically, might there be here?
Well, I don't know about this one 100%, but what about crocodiles? I mean, I know it's been heard of before.
Yeah, I mean, there was a panic in the northeast of England once when somebody released one of those little baby crocodiles into a pond in I think it was Washington. Crocodiles maybe, but once again, the thing about crocodiles that would easily match that kind of flat trawling of the surface of the water, that would fit. The long neck sticking out, that is an ounce of a problem. But certainly the vast majority of the things captured right here on Loch Ness have been flat to the water. So that would fit. But again, crocodiles have to breathe outside of the water. So they would have to come up fairly regularly. Therefore, surely somebody would spot them. And also late at night, especially this time of night, when we are, they'd be there on the surface of the water, getting ready to feed. And also, where's all of these Nessie's humps? Yeah. There's not a hint of a Nessie, unless it's a crocodile with a humpy back. Who knows? I mean, anything is possible. They talked recently about sturgeon. Now, I don't know whether you're aware, but sturgeon are massive fish. They're the fish that give you caviar. So I think if they were up here, knowing Scottish people the way that I do, they'd be farming those little beggars. But they can grow up to like 10, 12, 15, 16 feet. That's a big fish, but it's a fish. So therefore, nothing particularly out of the water. What else then?
Well, what about the monster itself, you know, a prehistoric dinosaur?
And when I saw the footage that Sir Peter Scott is not one of these kind of guys that's ever messed around. He doesn't bull you. He doesn't blind you with science. And he came to Loch Ness and I think got nearer to what's in here than anybody else. He's thought for years that it could be a creature called a plesiosaur. If you have a look at these, it's the standard long-necked dinosaur, head out the water, but instead of having 4 feet, it's 4 enormous flippers, because they were amazing in the water. The way you see seals playing underwater, they were fast, they were quick, they would show themselves and then they'd be gone, and yet if they wanted to, they could just muck about and kind of glide across the surface. Plesiosaur, outside chance. The thing about that was Peter Scott took some footage. He got a photograph of a flipper. That is the flipper of a plesiosaur. No question about it. That is a plesiosaur's flipper. However, the rest of the creature, there was a couple of other shots that looked magnificent in the darkness. But as you know, a picture taken in the black can quite often be misconstrued to be 1,000 things. So is there a prehistoric creature in there? If there is, there has to be a dozen of them, because they have to be a breeding colony. There have to be enough of them to continue. The interesting thing about a plesiosaur is, though, that they only ever inhabited areas where there was enough food to sustain them. So in the same way that maybe a terrapin in a fish tank, if it's a foot tank, will never grow bigger than 4 inches, because it knows that it's only got a foot to work in. So its body tells it you're not growing any bigger than 4 inches. I had one of these, so I know all about it. I put it in a 3-foot tank. Within a year, it was 1 foot long. Now, if you move that across, and yes, we understand it's a slightly different creature, and the scale is certainly massively more. If you have a creature that will not outbreed an area that it fishes, then it could sustain a small family of plesiosaurs right here. And if you use the terrapin analogy, if a plesiosaur will grow to a certain size, depending on its habitat, Loch Ness is massive. This could be a huge, huge creature. But there's other things as well. What else have you thought of?
Well, what about the obvious one, eels?
Eels, we know there are eels here. Last time we visited Loch Ness, it was a long time ago, we saw eels up to kind of 14, 15, 16 foot long with a body on them like a human being. You know, it's like 20, 30-inch waist on this thing. Now, to see one of them going across the water, and because of the way they swim, the elongations could look like the humps of the Loch Ness Monster. Could an eel stick its head out of the water so far that it would look like it had a long neck? Don't know. That's probably the downside of it. We've caught a few eels this week, some long ones too, 10-foot eel. Was that Nessie? 10 foot? I think it would be his granddad. If Nessie is an eel, there could be so many of them that it's absolutely massive. And of course, the thing about certain eels, conger eels particularly, and they're commonplace all over the waters here of Scotland, if they attack you, they can make a right mess.
So since we've started looking at this catfish idea, now this is the one that you're most scared of.
It's the one that I lean towards, if I'm honest. Last time I was here, I was almost certain it had to be an eel, because we'd seen the eels here are monsters. They're monster eels, and there's not just one or two, there's hundreds, and you just need 10 to swim across the surface of the lake with the amount of cameras that's here for everybody to go, wow, we've just seen Nessie. But it's the catfish thing. I don't know how many of you saw a documentary on television recently about the river Ganges in India. Now, it's the sacred river of the Hindu. And all of a sudden, along this stretch of about 3.5-4 miles of river, they realized that people were going missing. They didn't know why. Fully dressed, fully clad, fully healthy people were in the water washing clothes, and they just get grabbed by something and taken away. And kind of like what we're doing. Is it sharks? Is it crocodiles? And some Hindus, is it an evil god spirit that's returned to the river? A lot of questions were asked. They sent skin divers down to have a look, and they discovered catfish up to 40 feet long. Now, 40 feet's big catfish. In rivers in Britain, people regularly catch 18 to 20 feet catfish. So these are big guys, and they're normal to have about. Certainly catfish in Loch Ness, no question. Are they 40 foot long? The reason they got to be 40 foot long in the Ganges was that just up the river is where they hold all of the funeral rituals, where they burn members of their family and then they lower the bodies into the Ganges. They give the body back to where it was created from, because we all came from the water initially, irrespective of what your religious books might say, to give it back to the water. And when they were putting all these bodies in the water, the catfish were saying, thank you, here's dinner, tea and supper. They grew massive sizes and acquired a taste for human flesh. So a big catfish, and for those of you that keep catfish, and I know a lot of you are like aquarium types, for those of you that keep it, you will know that if you've got a really big catfish and a couple of small fish in the tank, the small fish will disappear, because a catfish will eat anything it can get in its mouth. Anything. Now, if you're a 40-foot catfish, your mouth will be wide enough to eat the largest woman or largest man you know. And that's a fact. And that's what makes this next part of our adventure here to Loch Ness. And we're so thrilled that the tourist board brought us up here, because we're going to try something tonight that's not been done, and it's going to be interesting.
Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
Hi there, it's Richard here. We put months of work into this, lots and lots and lots of things to do here. And, Kenny, I know you've got reservations about this,
Well, I really have. Some of the things Alan's done, like being buried, underground. We've done the horrible Bone Cathedral Halloween at midnight. He's been abroad with dogs chasing him and all kinds of stuff, but this is probably the worst thing ever. I'm really worried about this one for several reasons, but essentially, if you're going to go into water late at night, in the dark, where there could be animals, whatever it is that's living under Loch Ness, it's very worrying. And the fact is, underwater, you can imagine underwater it's going to be freezing cold. People can die when they're in that amount of water and in that sort of temperatures. Freezing cold, dark, and I'm just really worried about the whole thing. Don't forget as well, this is the biggest one. Alan can't swim.
Honestly?
No, he can't swim. Never ever learned. Doesn't know how to. So why he's going in the water, I have no idea.
We're waiting for Alan now, and a couple of guys from the dive centre are just there getting him dressed. So here we are, waiting. We'll see what happens.
Step for man. One great step for mankind. Have you seen the plate? This is ridiculous. Hang on. I'm going to walk actually quite slow. At the present moment, I'm wearing something that would not look out of place in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that was kind of like 60s or 70s. Kirk Douglas, stylish, hoopy T-shirt. Not me. I'm in this brown, waterproof thing. And I've got this weird kind of, I don't know whether you can hear this, but there's this kind of like metal clasps all over the place. It's not making any noise, but it's big and it's gawky. And a helmet goes on top of here. And you've organised this helmet and you've rigged it up with a microphone for me. So once I get underwater, then I can talk to you. But when the helmet's physically on, which I'm not going to put it on the absolute last moment, I've never been claustrophobic. But then again, I've never been underwater in something like this. The shoes have got things where you can put metal plates in, and they've been weighted for somebody of my weight to hang, not just like not to be dragged behind the boat, so that you actually go down, the boat will be static, and I should hang. Lots of lads who are into health and safety and stuff, because we obviously have to do this right and take and we've already trod on one or two of those regulations, it has to be said. But I'm going to be hanging apparently 10 feet below the water. Do you not think this looks kind of sexy?
I love the boots.
Thanks for the boots are pretty good. Thanks very much. Now what we're going to do, I know it's going to be a dance getting me on the boat, and then we're heading out a ways. So between now and then, there's not really a whole lot happening other than giving us an opportunity for you to hear some of the people, genuine people, not crazies, who've actually seen the monster. We've been sharing a few of these with you tonight, but we've got to get to the bit of the loch that goes down 815 feet, which is 4 times deeper than most of the oceans of the world. So that's the bit we're hanging over, because let's face it, if there is anything down there, and we've talked a little bit about what it could be, if there's anything out there, do you know what really, really worries me more than... First of all, I am scared pooless that something will snap and I'm just going to go straight down. That kind of worries me, because I'm going to be held on by, we know there's like cord, just cord. I want stainless steel holding me on. Anyway, cord, and there's a couple of air pipes, and there's also the wire for the microphone. So I know there's a few things holding on to me, and all of them have been tested above my body weight. Great. So shouldn't be... But it was just that thing that happened when you put the bait in and you said 11-inch bite mark. And I looked at various parts of everything. 11-inch bite mark. My leg's off. My leg's off 11-inch bite mark. My arm's off 11-inch bite mark. And the other thing is...
11-inch bite into the suit. The suit fills with water. And I know that you guys have said, and again, we kind of had a little briefing with the lads, I've just got to tug the rope 3 times and I can be in the boat in minutes. I'm not great at holding my breath. If my suit punctures and fills with water, you're going to have to get me in there like spit. Otherwise I won't be. In fact, I'll be dead. But I won't be. I'll be a bloody unpleasant ghost. So you've been warned. Anyway, here's another couple of people who've witnessed the monster, by which time hopefully I'll be on the boat. We'll be heading out to the deep bit. That's why we had to drive here, to get as close to it as we possibly can. Tonight, we're doing something no one's done.
This is Frank Searle, died aged 83 in 2005. He was the most famous British photographer on Loch Ness. He took that famous photograph.
I'm a Londoner originally. I was a professional soldier for 18 and a half years, but I've now been up on Loch Ness for just over 7 years. I came up here just to satisfy myself about the Loch Ness scene. The usual sighting is the back of the animal, and I think people usually describe it as something like an upturned boat, 14 or 15 feet in length, 3 feet out the water, dark grey to black in colour. Usually a big swirl of water, and perhaps just there 7 or 8 seconds. My 18 years in the Paras did me much more good than any knowledge of photography, because I'm a firearms expert. I walk around with this, just as when I was a paratrooper, I walked around with a Tommy gun, and anything moves, I go like that. Yeah. I can photograph these jet planes that fly down the loch and absolutely freeze them stone cold at 1,000ths of a second. I think actually we might describe one sighting which indicates how lucky one can be to get a sighting, that it is pure luck. There's nothing else you can work on. In 1972, I had an Australian girl come along on holiday with a pack on her back and got really hooked on this scene and asked if she could stick around for a while on her holiday. She'd only been in Scotland 24 hours. I hadn't had a sighting for 10 months. The first time she came out in the boat with me, we got the best sighting that had ever been photographed on Loch Ness. And that girl had actually been out in the boat with me for 4 hours and 10 minutes. I think it was quite a spectacular sighting. Also, it proves just how lucky one can be. We know very little about these creatures. I think it would be quite honest to say that all we know, there's something in Loch Ness which is far larger than anything that you would expect to find in a British freshwater lake. Something like 1,400 years of written records about these things. We come up with the fact that there's something out there which is perhaps 30 feet in length, and an accumulation of all these eyewitness reports over 1,400 years, plus my own experiences, my own photographs, indicate that these creatures resemble the prehistoric plesiosaur. It's accepted that these animals, whatever they are, were coming to and from the sea, using this as a feeding or breeding ground, as big sea creatures use the Norwegian fjords, and some got trapped when Loch Ness was cut off from the North Sea by a local volcanic action. And to tie in with that, there's been similar sightings in the North Sea and the North Atlantic, not only hundreds of years ago, but since World War II as well. And marine biologists are agreeing on 14 as being the minimum number they think would be needed to keep the species going. They're working on the assumption that these things breed the same as things they know about. They could be wrong, but you've got to accept someone's figures. In 1973, we had an author named Mr. F.W. Holliday, who once wrote a book saying that these creatures were solid animate objects, and then wrote another book saying that they were not, that they were phantom spirits. He brought a retired priest up, and they went out in a small boat, sprinkled holy water on the loch, and exorcised these phantom spirits that were swimming about in the loch. Strangely, 2 months after the exorcism, I actually photographed one of the animals, and I've taken about 4 photographs since then. I don't really see how one can take photographs of a phantom spirit. And in fact, the last picture I took on the loch this year, February 26, 1976, with 3 visitors standing talking to me, has been blown up 20 times onto a video screen by Japanese television, and it's possible to see the eye, the mouth, the gills, the muscles in the neck of this creature, which I don't think you would see in one of Mr. Holliday's phantom spirits. I'm an ex-professional soldier. I've travelled all over the world. I've seen some strange things. I've done some strange things. I've seen the animals that live in Loch Ness. I've photographed them, and I know that what I have seen is a solid animate object. Nothing supernatural or any kind about it.
Catherine Robertson, district nurse.
And I walked back a bit and took her picture, and as I handed back the camera, I noticed this huge animal. It just was swimming right along the shore, you know, and it was about 42 to 43 feet long. It had a huge bulky body and two hams, and the body was sort of heaving out and in, and there was sort of a noise. This noise came from it, and the body was grey, like an elephant skin sort of, and it had a long thin neck. It was about 16 to 18 feet out of the water, and the head was like a shape of a horse's head. You know, it had no dome, and it was huge, the head, but compared to the body, it was small, and I couldn't keep my eyes off that head. You know, it was absolutely terrific. You know, it looked as if it looked towards us, you know, but I'm sure it didn't. But the whole surrounding of the head was white, and in the middle of it was a darker spot, you know. But it couldn't be the eye, the darker spot, because it must have been huge, enormous, if it had been the eye, you know. But it was all white around, and along the neck in the front, it was white, you know. And mind you, it swam very, very slowly, quite along the shore there, and it's supposed to be very shallow there, you know. And then it went right opposite to Borlum there, you know, Borlum Farm. And then it contracted. The hams became quite sort of high up, and it stood there static. And, you know, having lived here, well, at that time it was, 15 years. I'm living here now 20 years, and you hear sort of sightings, you know, and they say it's with a terrific speed it goes, but it didn't. But I was still sort of wanting to watch for the wash, you know, to come near the shore. And I told Ruth, my friend, I said, wait until the wash, it's bound to come. And here I saw quite a grey wave coming on. I say, look, that's this big wave coming on now. She says, no, look, it's another one. And this was the same. It was just 1/4 of the other one. It was much, much smaller. It had only one hump. It actually looked like a giant tortoise, and with the same long neck and this squarish sort of head, you know. And it was very boisterous. This one took a short route. It never swam along the bay there, you know. And we watched it, and it was so quick in its movements, you know. The skin on top of the whole body, it was loose, and it moved like that in a round sort of rocking way, you know. And that definitely was quite a distinctive sound it made, and it like a horse, you know, when it's feeding, and it made this, and you could hear the splatter of water, you know, on the surface. And then as this wee one caught up with the other one, they just subsided, and I suppose it must have been about 12 to 13 minutes that we watched it, the whole procedure, you know. That morning it was rather misty, you know, and then it became very, very hot, just a day like today, you know, and the visibility was clear, and the loch was absolutely calm. There was not a ripple on it. I couldn't sort of say quite exactly how far. I should think about 250 yards. Actually, our lady came and parked her car beside us. I went to her and introduced myself. I said, I am Mrs. Robertson. That there, I said, is the Loch Ness Monster. And she looked down upon me as if I was mad, you know. And then she had a binocular, she watched it, but she saw sort of only the tail end of the second one, you know. I wasn't afraid. Also, I was
what you called it was, I was you-struck. You know, I was eerie. It was eerie, really, to see a big thing like that. And I had goose pimples on my body. I would say it was a very shy animal and sort of a little bit stupid too, you know, but in a way proud as well. This was a living thing. These were two animals, definitely. There is no two doubt about in my mind. No wonder it's called monster, you know. I never had an imagination. It was so huge. And mind you, later on, I meet a lot of old people, and some of the old people still speak the Gaelic, you know, here. And there was a Smitty that were very old people, and they spoke the Gaelic between themselves. And I never let on about the noise, because, you know, they probably calculate you are not really right in your head, you know. And this old lady once asked me, she said, Nash, have you seen the monster? She must have heard something. I said, yes. And then she spoke to her brother in Gaelic, and something. And Yahushk, I heard, and I knew that Yahushk in Gaelic is a horse, a water horse or something. And they said, now, Jeannie, I said, do translate what you have said to Willie now, you know. And she said, well, no, I told her that you saw the snorting water horse. And I was taken quite aback. I said, the snorting water horse, now you tell me. I said, yes. She said, you see, that is a nickname we give it, we locals give to the horse. She says, you know, as we were small, and if we did something naughty, my parents would say, now, snorting water horse will get you, you know.
Estimates of sightings of the creature, or creatures, in Loch Ness range from 4 to 12,000, depending on whose figures you decide to accept. In the past 40 years, sightings have increased. This could simply be a result of publicity from the media, or the Scots themselves speaking more freely about the subject, as once it was forbidden to speak of it, if you had seen it. A number of countries have financial and scientific reasons for trying to find the monster. These include the United States of America, Japan, and Western Germany. They're deploying a formidable array of hardware worth many millions of pounds, ranging from jet planes and helicopters to midget submarines, all using highly sophisticated filming and sonar equipment, some of which was developed by Marconi Marine, who designed the advanced electronics necessary for Europe's very latest fighter aircraft. A testament to the determination of some interests in the tracking down of Nessie is a reported offer of £250,000 for any conclusive photograph.
Ian Dunn and Billy Kennedy, they fished the loch twice a week.
This was about 8 o'clock at night on a Monday night. We were out in the loch about 10 to 9. Weather conditions were very calm. It was. We did the boat. We were going up alongside a Brechin pier, going up towards Drummond Rocket. We're about quarter mile out, about quarter mile up from the pier. When I looked back in the wake of the boat, to see about 200 yards back a hump coming out of the water. So then I just nudged my mate. We turned the boat, started on our way back, and just to make sure nothing would happen, we put on the life jackets because we didn't know what it was. So as we approached it, it started moving out, whatever it was, into the loch. So it was just slightly over a quarter mile in. It stopped, and we were roughly about 60 yards from whatever it was, the moving object. And then a lot of other ones got up, about 4 other humps got up. Then we went closer just to see what it was, which was frightening, because we kept turning the boat back towards the pier, facing towards the pier in case anything happened. But then we were getting too far away from them again, and we just turned the boat back into them again. The one that came out the most was about 3 foot out of the water, about 12 foot long, sort of pyramid shaped, you know, and the rest were roughly about 2 foot out of the water. It was very frightening, you know. At one point, we seen this, what we thought was one monster with 3 humps, coming towards the boat. And we were just going to turn the boat, and then it split up, the 2 humps behind split up. And it was obviously 3 different objects, whatever they were. It was like a mother and two of the family following sort of thing. Then they just split up. They were just going round, sort of moving about, going under the water, coming back up. But at one point, without exaggerating, there were 5 different objects just moving about. You know, like a school of wheels, you know, just moving about. We had nothing aboard. We had no camera aboard. It was very quiet at that time. It was about 9:15. And even looking up towards the road, we couldn't see anyone about. The frightening part was that we didn't know how long they were, how heavy they were, how big they were, and we were frightened it would lift up the boat. You know, that was the main fear. Because at one point, when we decided to go back into the pier, because it started to rain then, and the water started churning up a bit, we reckoned we better get back. We sort of pushed our luck so far. One followed us in. It was about 15 yards from the boat. And we were going faster, it started to get faster, until actually we put the boat into, as a very fast boat, we put it to give it full throttle and went straight back at the pier. You've got to see it to believe it.
Alan Robson, live from Scotland.
No, I absolutely can't believe this. I'm in this suit. I'm going into the loch where the boat is rocking. It's pitch black. All we can see at the present moment are the lights from the occasional house, and maybe sometimes when a car moves along. This suit looks amazing. I'm not going to put the helmet on yet, but you can swim. Why don't you do this, Kenny?
Because I'm not stupid. I've got to write the health and safety report on this, so therefore I've got to do that part of this. I would not go in that water at this time of night in that pitch black. It's too dangerous.
But I mean, the spotlights from the side of the boat light up a fair bit of ground, a fair bit of area underneath the boat, but it is meant it's rocking a bit.
Exactly, and while the boat's rocking, it's still moving a little bit away from where you're going to be. And
I'm going to be attached to the boat. I'm going to be fine.
It's still dangerous, Alan. You know that.
I know, but we've had a look at this. I can't swim, so they've had to put me in this big suit with a helmet on so they can mic me up so that I can talk to me. So I'm going to do that. Richard, have you got the bolts and everything that you need?
I've got all the bits and pieces. Yeah, I've got the hand pump for the compressor as well.
Now, Kenny, that's what I want you to do. Just keep the oxygen going as much as we can. They say that you cannot pump too much, pardon the expression. Yeah. So I'm going to do that. Join me next when it takes about a little bit of time to get this hat on. Then it's over to these guys.
This is Gaynor here, and Alan's in the suit, all kitted up, looking a treat, Mr. Say. He's got the helmet on, and Kenny, what do you think? Should we get him down now?
I'm ready to let him go down there, but I am a bit worried about this one because it is something that we've never done before, and it's quite dangerous under this water. But yeah, you want to do it, so let's go for it. Yeah.
Richard, are you ready? Have you got the pump and everything sorted there?
I've got the pump going.
Is he mic'd up? Can you just check just to make sure we've got him?
Yep, hang on a minute, just a minute. Yep, wires in place, it all looks good. I've got the thumbs up.
Hi, Alan, can you just give us a knock to let us know you're all right to go?
Oh, right. Okay, ladies. I'm going down. Good job I'm not remotely claustrophobic, or if I am, you're going to find out in a hurry. Now, I'm wearing the kind of outfit that kind of ancient skid divers used to wear years and years and years ago. I must admit, at first I thought, first time I see anything, because obviously it's kind of old-fashioned. They're replacing the air in this step by step as the night goes. I just hope that nobody up there stops or takes a break, because down here you can see so very little. Now, let me just explain my position. You heard me getting into the water before. We are approximately about 250, 300 yards from shore. We're near the deepest part of the loch, directly beneath me, and I'm moving my feet to the left and I'm moving my feet to the right. The microphone is inside here. There's 2 wires going up to the surface. One wire is the microphone lead that's been completely covered with plastic to keep it hopefully safe and working. Otherwise, this is going to be the shortest finale to a show you've ever heard. It's unpleasant in here. It's very hot. Your breath comes back to you. Sometimes it kind of distorts the glass in front of me, because I must say that I was worried, like condensation, so they said there'd be a little bit and then it would probably run into my suit. Lovely. What can I say at the present moment? Well, directly ahead of me there is the underside of the boat. If I just tilt my head up a little bit, directly under the boat there's 4 huge spotlights under the water, just under the water, kind of lighting up a whole square of Loch Ness, and swimming through it. I mean, it's attracting stuff to it, there's no question about that. You see a few small fish going by. In the distance before, I don't know whether it was just my imagination or whatever, but I saw something that the nearest thing I could put it down to was like, you know when somebody throws like a party streamer and you see something snaking through the air, there was something directly ahead. It wasn't very big, there's possibly an eel or something kind of moving around, but to be honest, looking at the eels that we've already seen this week here at Loch Ness, I don't particularly want any of them coming anywhere near me. Now, I've got mitts on, so pretty much all of my areas are covered for baits, should anything kind of come my way. You just feel like you're bait, and it is absolutely freezing. Inside the head, the helmet part of the suit, it is meltingly hot because your breath comes back to you, and your head's the hottest part of your body anyway. But my limbs, my feet, and I keep kind of sweeping them around, my feet are absolutely freezing. You know, to the degree that I literally can't freeze my toes. I can't freeze my toes. Blame me. Can't even speak. I must admit, my very first moments after disappearing under the water, because the suit slightly weighted, just weighted enough to keep me kind of down, and it's the soles of the boots apparently that they do that. They could slide plates into the bottom of the boots to give you a heavy, if you need it to be well down, or just a few light panels for me tonight, because I'm approximately 10, I'm guessing 12 feet below the boat, and because there's so much dark around me, you keep staring at the 4 lights under the boat, and every now and then the current will kind of draw me backwards and take me further away from the boat, and your heart starts really, really pounding and panicking, because if this rope connection, it's like rope, air tube and cable, if any of them came undone, I can't swim. I also can't breathe water. So this is one of, well, I'm kind of outside my comfort zone. Big style with this. Now, the thing that's tricky is I can see stuff in the light. Now, even with the light beneath the boat, the amount you can see is fairly small. Every now and then a piece of seaweed or, well, presumably lochweed or whatever moves past, because there's a hell of a current down here. But the trick is I'll just use my arms to kind of make me turn around. Oh God, I wish I hadn't done that. That's nasty. It's just black. I mean, it's just... Oh, what was that? Just freaking myself out a bit. It's not funny. This is not funny. It's a deep, dark blackness. The Loch Ness is massive, and if you look down, it's like just a bottomless pit. You can't see zip. You really can't. But on the same hand, you can't see anything coming out of the darkness. Good God, if I saw something now, what would I do? I've been told that to get out, all I've got to do is kind of tug on the cables, and if you tug the cables, then they could get you in about 3 or 4 minutes. And 3 or 4 minutes. I watched too many Jaws films. You haven't got 3 or 4 minutes, have you? crazy. I can feel my pulse in my wrists, and yet I can't feel my toes at all. If they had been chewed off by something, I really wouldn't know. Hang on, I cannot keep staring at nothing. I'm just gonna swing around. It takes about 3 or 4 kind of waves. The good thing is I'm not carrying anything, so you can use your hands to go. There's the word again. I really find it hard to believe that anybody would want to... Well, why did I just say Christopher Fisher's back at Metro Radio, otherwise you just know he would be down here with, like, a lump of salmon tied to his head. But the thing is, we've used bait all week, and now light is the bait. I know you might be thinking I'm the bait. I have no intention of getting eaten here. Do you know, I don't know how hard they're pumping up there on that deck, but there's not enough air getting. I'm gonna have to pull the cable. I'm gonna pull the cable. I'm gonna. Oh!
Alan, you're gonna have to shout up. I've got to have your mics off. I'm gonna have to change the batteries.
Kenny,
yeah.
Please, for God's sake, you gotta keep pumping.
I'm pumping.
I know, but just don't stop, because I need twice as much as you're giving me.
Right.
It gets really kind of disconcerting otherwise. Can you get this, put the hat straight back on, Rich, because otherwise I'm gonna bottle this.
Right, okay.
Metro Radio. Alan Robson. Live from Scotland.
Right. Think of any F word you want. Fiddly day. Alan Robson with you. We are live from approximately 15 to 20 feet below the surface of Loch. I say I am hanging like a pinata. I'm hanging like a worm on a hook, waiting for something to come and eat me up. You know, we've been talking earlier on about some of the things that might be in the air. I really do discount stuff like sharks and seals. I thought maybe seals, but no, apparently not. Sturgeon they've got though, and they're massive, big fish. Apparently in here, Richard was telling me huge pike, and of course that whatever took that chunk out of the bait that we found earlier in the week, kind of like a 9-inch mouth on it. That's from side to side. That could take a decent lump out of a flashing blade. But will I be? Did you hear that? Something's just hit the outside of my helmet now. There's only glass in the front bit. Let me just spin around. Did you hear any? Did you hear something there? Did you hear just like some taps? Not liking that much. My hands are down by my sides. My feet, almost the second that I eased my way down again, became instantly frozen. And yet I just clearly heard some taps before. I don't know whether you picked them up, but I don't want to hear them again. I've kind of swung around and there's just blackness wherever you go, complete and utter blackness. And it's pump you buggers up there. The only air that I can suck in comes into the helmet, and there's this little gadget on the back of the helmet that apparently gets rid of bad air and allows new air in, but I think because it's very old, I think it also takes away the good air too sometimes. My lungs feel, instead of filling my chest, it's like two little pockets of air instead, and it's finally not enough. just under the boat there, there's a fish, followed by, and then straight after it there was 3 or 4 other fish. I don't know what they were, they were kind of trouty-like fish. I wouldn't be able to know the differences. Although, lots of seaweed moving around, and even late at night, here in Loch Ness, the current is very, very strong. Every now and then you get a kind of, you feel your body kind of moving and rolling with the water. And, you know, we've had the horrific tsunamis that we've had across the world. We've had more than we could do within the past 20 years. The power of large bodies of water, it's phenomenally strong. And you know, I'm not doing anything here. I'm not moving about, and yet it's using extraordinary amounts of energy just to keep hanging here, and occasionally moving your arm just to keep you straight, looking at that boat. There's something just in the darkness past the bottom of the boat. It's oh, hang on a second, I think it's going to go over my head. The problem is it's so dark outside. There's something going. Can't move my head too far back as the metal clasp at the back of the helmet won't let you hit it. I think it's something like a fallen tree or something. It's just kind of... And you first see that, you think, oh my God, what has Nessie paid me a visit? It looked just like a big kind of tree stump or log or something, but it was about 6 or 7 foot long. If it was Nessie, it should be bigger than that, bless her. People talk about, did you get some more noise there? Did you hear something else hit my helmet there? There's stuff in the water, but you think it... You hear that again? Listen. When I suggested that down here, well, not even down here, 10, 15 feet up, where the surface of the loch is, I suggested a long time ago that the Loch Ness monster could actually be a ghost, could be a spirit, could be a full-bodied apparition travelling across the surface of the water, like many seamen off the North Sea have witnessed, you know, in areas where ships have been lost, and suddenly out of the mist in the middle of the night, something just looms at them, and it's kind of man shape. But could that not be the shape of, like, Nessie's head? And if that's the case, then we're in the wrong place, and this is a stupid, dumb thing to do. Must admit, it feels even more stupid and dumb at the present moment. My nose is blocked. I'm having to do all my breathing with my mouth. I don't know. It might be something to do with, like, pressure, maybe, or my ears occasionally have popped, but you know, you can't hold your nose and kind of blow out to clear the pop. And my right ear's really, really hurting. I've got a bit of pressure pain in there, you know, like the same kind of thing that maybe you experience when you're taking off in an airplane, you know, that sucker sweet kind of... Wish I had one now, but I'm down here to tell you what I can see, and out of my vision is just move around. You guys move really, really slow as I move around to face the blackness again. Your eyes get kind of used to seeing what little light there is there, but there's a little bit of light off the boat behind me, so it lights up a bit of an area. However, every now and then you see a little bit of blackness that just looks slightly darker than everything else around it. It seems to be moving, and I don't know whether that's just my eyes playing tricks and messing with my head, because it wouldn't be hard to do, because I am particularly frightened. I don't say that often when I'm doing stuff like this, but I'm not liking it much. Now, I need more air. I told them to really hammer the pump when I was down here. I don't know whether... I just feel so weak. So weak. I know it's been a hell of a week, and we've... The end of the boat on the right. No, sorry, the left-hand side. So I'm getting disorientated again. I think the lack of air is really making it kind of weird. So sorry. Please bear with me. Come on, Nessie. Where are you? Come on. Take a few tours. I can spare a toe or two. Try and get the middle one so I can still balance. Come on, Nessie. Come on, anything. If there's something in you. Let me see it. Come on. Alan Robson with you in Loch Ness. I just swerve around. I was kind of side on with the lights of the boat. I'm now, whoa, hang on, whoa, can you feel that current? Whoa, hang on, I'm kind of lying flat like I'm in bed. In the present, I'm just looking up and the boat's directly above me. Whoa, I got within about, thought should I crash into the bottom of the boat there. I'm kind of falling down a little bit, but that was just what created a wake like that to make it move so much. I saw even the bottom of the boat moved. I'm just turn around and look into the black. Half of me wants to pray to see something. Half of me wants to frankly crap this. Just black. Just billions of gallons of water. Billions. And we know there's huge catfish in here. We know sturgeon. I was hoping catfish would stay away from maybe the middle part, because it was the ones we were most worried about. I don't know whether they stay close to the shore. You always kind of get the impression that they're like bottom feeders. If so, how could that be, the Loch Ness Monster? Because every sighting's been made on the surface. I'm running out of air. Just a thing. I'm gonna go back to the surface. I'm not gonna get out the boat this time, because I know if I do, I'll not get back in. I'm just gonna go to the surface and get a little bit of air. Please bear with me in the meantime. Pull me up. I'm tugging the damn thing. Nobody's come on. Pay attention. I'm going up for some air. Text them. I'm pulling the damn thing. Oh, there we go. I'm going up. Be back with you soon. Alan Robson in Loch Ness. Away beyond the monster.
Right, he's come back to the surface, but he doesn't look too good. We need to give him some more oxygen. It's not working out, is it?
Angus had just said there, he's attached him to that tube so we can get more oxygen in there, to give him more breathing space in there, so it should be safe with that, hopefully, but I'm still worried about it, mind.
I am. It's absolutely freezing up here. I can't imagine how he feels down there.
Well, that's the thing. It's choppy. It's black down there. The boat's rocking from side to side. He's going to be doing a lot of movement in there, and I would imagine panicking as well, because it's going to be pitch black down there. It's an awful situation.
Yeah, I mean, we can't even see up here, can we? Hardly.
Not at all. I really want to get him back up, actually. I really want to get him back up now.
Since he's got the oxygen, should we just get him down straight away?
Well, okay.
He wants to do it.
But not for long. Not for long,
let's
honestly.
get him back down now.
Metro Radio. Alan Robson, Beyond the Monster.
Hello everybody, Alan Robson with you. Yes, I am back underneath the water, and I must admit I feel 1,000 times better, because I am indebted to Angus from the board. Angus says he's got an oxygen tank and he let me suck on that tube. God bless him. And he just let me pump a bit of oxygen into me. And I must admit I feel better. I was starting to get a real headache. Now, they've found a way to increase the amount of air. They've just... I don't know whether you can even tell it. It's in my head it sounds different. I don't know whether it sounds different to you wherever you are, but still need to keep sucking that air. But by what they're saying is that usually if they've got somebody using this kind of thing like they would have done in maybe the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, they still use it occasionally for super keen Nessie hunters like myself. So it's been fully in working condition. But usually they say that anybody using this suit, first of all, would be walking on the surface, the underwater, beyond the ground, though, so they'd be able to walk rather than float, and they certainly wouldn't be talking. They'd be saving their breath for doing the least thing, because underwater, anything you do completely takes it out of you. Now, at the present moment, what the hell was that? Just saw something else. One of the guides of the loch said that if you see anything under the boat, the water will magnify the size of it. So, just seen a fish there that looked about 2 foot long, so it's probably a foot long. Just thinking if my private part should escape, we could have another monster scare all over the press. Oh, dear. Everybody upstairs is just kind of wanting the best, wanting me to get something. And I want to get something too, but you just kind of hang here and you wait, you can feel, even though your feet's absolutely bitter cold, your head's strangely warm, and you feel like it's impossible because it's so cold in here, yet I can feel sweat from the nape of my neck kind of running down the small of my back. Dear. If you're wondering what I'm doing, it's actually getting a little bit harder to spin around, and with my glove I'm just trying to wipe over the glass at the front. I don't know, something went past me that I think it was like old leaves just kind of plopping around under the water. You see sticks and bits of, to be honest, bits of looks like poo kind of floating by under the light area. It is attracting fish. Seen quite a lot of them now. Seen a couple of eels. It's a couple of eels right at the very beginning. Don't want to see any of the big boys, please, because they can't take a serious chunk out of you. You just kind of hang on. I'm going to turn and face the black. Gently. There you go. Facing into the blackness there. And you just kind of feel... So easy for your mind to play tricks with you. I could have sworn I saw something in the blackness, but on saying that, the least movement of a fish just kind of turning and the light from the boat reflecting off scales might be enough to do something like that, but you never really... Oh, shut up! What's that? Something. Looking around. Something. I don't even think it actually hit me. Something went past me at speed. right past my hands were. My hands are down by my side, and I felt something just go past the glove, and it kind of spun me round, and I didn't know what was happening there for a minute. If I shouted there, I'm sorry. God, I've never been in my life just. It's just petrol. And when you look around to where it is, you see that bloody boat with the 4 lights in it. Whatever moved past me. Can I estimate speed? Speed bloody quick. Just, it was there, then it was gone. But you could feel the water moving past you. It more than a current. I didn't hear anything. Still can't breathe. My nose is totally blocked. And then you stare into the blackness, and I saw something like a glint, but it could be like, it could just be a large fish or something. But that was moving. That was really, really moving. My God, that was moving. I think the backside of this suit's going to be heavier coming out of the water than it was going in. That was not funny. And you know, I'm staring away from the light at the present moment, and directly ahead of me there's just blackness that goes on forever. And yet, the more you look at it, the more it's like there's something there, kind of just out of reach, kind of, watching you. Now, just come back, watching for it. If you ask me how big that whatever it was went past me, I don't think I've got any way of knowing. Could be 10 feet, could be 2 feet. And I know men are said to exaggerate about size. This was something that, on travelling past you at speed, made you move. Made the water just distort you. I just spun on an axis, but not slowly like it is when I wave my hands. I just woof, I was gone. And then, of course, you think, did something hit you? And because you can't feel your legs, I've since kind of felt my legs are still there. The one place I can't actually see is I can't look down the front of the suit because only a certain point it's impossible to get the kind of the chin thing any further. I keep looking at that. Directly behind where the boat is, probably about, it's hard to estimate in the dark, but I'm guessing 20 or 30 feet behind the boat. I just feel there's something in this big black grey pea soup. I mean, the water's actually incredibly clear. During the day, when we've been out along the loch side, absolutely crystal clear. The most beautiful, clean water that if you put it in a glass, you wouldn't see loads of floaters or anything. This is a beautifully clean loch. And yet, just down 10 feet, and you've got a lot of kind of junk moving around here. And you see large pieces of what I presume to be weed that's just kind of moving by, and it moves by in a kind of ghostly way. It almost makes shapes like a spirit would, like an angel would. I keep looking back there. There was something in there, you know. For all those people who say that there's no such thing as a Loch Ness monster, there are Loch Ness monsters in here. There's not just a monster in here, there's monsters in here. Huge catfish, 14 feet. I don't think they'd be able to move as quickly as whatever that was that went past me. It could just be a really big fish, like a pike or something. It moved like a torpedo. It was like a seal taken off. I haven't seen any seals on the shores. I keep looking at that place back there like this. God, there's something. the blackness of the loch is all around. It's everywhere. It is everywhere you look in. Yet you look back in this one direction, and the blackness that's there seems to move. But it's moving in a way like it moves when it's down. It's moving around. Wish I could breathe better. My right shoulder is hurting a little bit. And the weight of the helmet. The helmet's very heavy and it's kind of cutting in my neck on my right hand side. I'm trying to move it around in the water, but it's shaking my arm because, oh God, that's sore. That's really sore. Kind of twist my arm around, try and use the muscles. There it is again, look at the glass. The lights of the boat fire straight down, but there's something out there. Something about 30, 40 yards behind the boat that you keep seeing a glimpse of something that is resembling. I'm guessing it's the scales of a fish. If it's not, what the hell is that? Oh, there's another wave. Go, around you go, whoa! Oh dear. I'm not an expert at all about underwater currents and stuff and how it works, but from time to time you get the feeling that there's water rushing past you, but all over, not like something moving past you, if that makes sense. And just like that, there's another one just as we speak, and it's making me, with my frozen below the waist and everything below the waist, I'll tell you, I'd be lucky to have a button mushroom at the present moment because it is absolutely freezing. Everything below the waist is just waving around and kind of lifting up because there's probably millions of gallons of water on the move there. It's bizarre. Hang on, I'm going back down again and I'm right facing the boat. I got quite close to the boat there. When the water takes you in that direction, you worry you're going to end up hitting the boat because, and you have no idea whether we're going to get anything tonight. It's you talk about a fishing expedition. The difference tonight is that you might do a fishing expedition for a television show, and essentially the cameraman stays there all day until you catch a damn thing. We could stay here forever and catch nothing. Although I must admit I've scared myself witless a little bit earlier on. I hope I didn't scream. I think I lost me. Oxygen's becoming a bit of a problem. And there you go, sucked back to that. I'm staring around the other way now because just something made me kind of turn around. There's more fish under the bottom of the boat than I've seen. There's probably about 30 or 40 fish of various sizes. There's one quite big one of a shape I've not seen before. Most of them are kind of shaped like a salmon would or a trout. No flat-fishy thing, there's nothing like that there. But there's another one that's kind of more round, with quite a highish fin on its back. I've no idea what that is. Looks like a grey kind of, almost, what do you call that brown stuff that you make chimneys out of? It's kind of that sandy kind of, what the... Sorry. A friendly fish kind of just looked in my visor there. Just kind of, all of a sudden you notice that there's two eyes. Just a fish is good now. Just a little, probably about 3, 4, 5 inches. Ladies, I know what you mean. You don't want something 5 inches in your face. You just do it. Oh my goodness. I don't know what the they've done, but I just felt a wave of fresh air coming out. I don't know whether they've changed tanks or whatever it is they're doing up there, because I was told it's like a hand pump thing. But that Scottish lad Angus, I did the oxygen for me. He's up there now and he knows what he's doing. Previously it was just my lot with a hand pump, like you were initially instructed to do. Whoa, there's a lot of water coming. Whoa! It's just like super strong current again. Super strong current. Oh, my shoulder's really sore. His hands kind of cutting in. Whoa! Whoa! It's just, whoa! Something! What? I'm flapping about like a flag here. I'm upside down in the minute. Whoa! 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 There's water! What the? I've hit something! I've hit something! I'm upside down! Oh, what's that? Is that, what am I touching? I think it's that. Oh, God, it's the boat. I'm flapping right up beside the boat. It's kind of like a roller coaster would just roll you up in the air, you know, like a swing. And there's so much water going past. The boat's moving from side to side, and I'm underneath the boat. I'm going to pull the coat, see if I can. I've got to get out of here. Oh, God, man. My shoulder, it's really cut in now because I'm upside down and it's kind of pushing and pushing and pushing. Oh, I was still beside the boat. Well, I'm going down a bit now, down a bit. There must be millions of gallons just moving around now. Is this a current thing or is there something swimming about in there making stuff move? Wishful thinking, I'm flapping, still flapping. Whoa! Joe! Stop! Shut! I can't swim. What am I doing? Pull me up! But the thing is, I still think I'm a bit under the boat. Let me try and get back down there and pull the... There, yanked it up. Christ. 3 times. Come on! That's it. I'm done. That's it. That is it. Well, I'm gonna... Look, I have to yank it again. I'm moving. Oh, but the water's still really choppy. Unbelievable. See you on the upside. Alan Robson's Nightowls. Loch Ness.
Of infancy through trembling years of youth, long murky middle age and final hours long in the tooth. Here's the 100 names of terror, creature you love the least. Picture his name before you and exercise the beast. Rolled up and down through history, spectre with tales to tell. In the darkness when the campfire's dead, you each his private well. If you look behind your shoulder, if you feel his eyes to feast, you can witness now the ever-changing nature of the beast. Be still. Be still. Be still. If you wear a walrus foreign, you can keep the foe at bay. You can pop the pills and visit some psychiatrist still say there is nothing I can do for you. Everywhere the danger zone, I'd love to help get rid of it, but I've got one of my own. Be still, there's a beast upon my shoulder. Be still, and a fiend upon my back. Be still, feel his burning breath and heaving. Be still, smoke oozing from his stack. He's a beast upon your shoulder. Be safe, and he's the price upon your head. He's the lonely fear of dying, and for some of living too. He's your private nightmare brigand. You just love to turn the screw. So stand as one defiant. With a red, your voice is swell. Stare that beast in the face and really give him hell. Be still. There's a beast upon my shoulder. Be still. And a fiend upon my back. Be still. Feel his burning breath a heaving. Be still. Smoke oozing from his stack. Be still. And he moves beneath the covers. Be still. Or he lies below the bed. Be still. Here's the beast upon your shoulder. Be still. And here's the price upon your head.
As you can probably tell, I am out of the helmet now, and I'm back on board a boat. I'm at the very back of it, where I suppose you'd imagine millionaires sitting. My voice is kind of gone. My chest feels crushed. My shoulder is really, really sore. I can't honestly believe that I did that, because that was something that I guarantee you, no matter how long I live, I will never ever do anything like that again. As you can tell, we're heading back towards shore now. It's the boat is just rocking from side to side, and Richard, I think I've broken one of your mics there, the one that I took in when I was coming out, literally out of the water there. I think I snapped it. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. I'll get it back and have a little look at it when we're back at the hotel.
All right, man. So, have I met with a monster? I think the point is, there's a lot of stuff in this water. There's a lot of stuff flying around, and although the boat was lit beneath the water, there's an awful lot of blackness down there. And I think I probably, at some point, screamed like a girl, and I apologise for that. But talk about a place full of mystery. This is... I feel like I've achieved something. I do feel like, even if it's just kind of conquering the fear of water, because never been able to swim, but at least I know I can hang about like a lump of meat on the end of some wire. My God, that was something. It's the Nightowls, and finally, I must admit, if I shut my eyes now, I guarantee I would not wake up till possibly next year. I feel completely flat. Richard, you had a good time, and what's been your highlights?
Yeah, going out on the boat in the day was absolutely superb. Scenery was absolutely fantastic. But at night time on the boat, nothing can touch that. That was absolutely marvellous.
Marvellous, because I'm still here, I'll tell you. Kenny, you looked particularly relieved when I came up for the last time. Apart from the dunking I've just had, because you love Scotland now. Ever since we regressed you and you realised it was your homeland, you have actually come here and felt very, very at home.
Very much at home. Every time I come up now, I just think this is my place. You know, one day, no doubt, I'll come back here, maybe when I'm not in the land of the living, and I think this is probably where I'll reside when I'm dead. I really do think that. I think that's that kind of place, because every time I come here, I feel really close to the place. I mean, once again, that cemetery was fantastic. It never fails to live up to its reputation. And the whole experience of Scotland, to me, you just can't beat it. There's no other feeling like coming here in the world.
Right. Now, Gayna's very first outside broadcast and trip away with the Nightowls programme. That's just Richard leaning on the horn, I think, there. You punched Richard very, very hard in the cemetery.
I did, yeah. Very hard.
Because he was fluttering around behind you and frankly scaring the pants off you.
I must say it was for a very good reason, though. We're standing at Bullskin Cemetery. I was scared out of my wits. And Richard, I was sort of dancing behind my back constantly for the entire evening, rustling his coat, had his big flat cap on, waterproof flat cap, and he deserved the punch.
Well, he certainly got a one, too. Have you enjoyed your first trip into the unknown?
I have. It's been an absolutely amazing experience. Bullskin Graveyard. It's going to live with me forever.
There you go. We hope some of the memories that you have, maybe of that witch, the woman who was killed in a previous life, maybe you'll remember that. Some of you perhaps the blessing, and I hope that it brought you a little bit closer to maybe members of your family who have passed over. As for me, I want to sleep for 1,000 years. But it's you guys at home. You've helped support us, and we appreciate it very much, because when you spend your life in a little tiny black box, the ability to get out and do something amazing is quite a gift to us. We thank you for that. And just before we disappear, a big thank you to everybody at the King's Mills Hotel who have been there. Is this a hotel? Oh, what a fantastic hotel they've given us. Also, a huge thank you to the Tourist Board, the Highland Tourist Board, who have been stunning. Give it up for the Tourist Board, everybody. Come on, make some noise for them. Well done, everybody. And from me, Alan Robson, the entire crew, the entire team back at the ranch as well. Crystal Fish, good night. God bless you. And I wish you well.
See my fall, see my error, know my faults, time halt, see my loss, know I'm lacking, backtracking, where I met you, pistol packing, itchy finger, trigger happy, try to trap me, being rap, why you tap me, backstab me, break the faith, fall from grace, tell me lies, time flies, close your eyes, come with me. Come with me. Come with me. Yeah. You said to trust you, you never hurt me. Now I'm disgusted, just adjusted. Certainly you fooled me, ridiculed me, left me hanging. Now shit boomeranging, right back at ya. Big long range, narrow-minded, left me blinded. I co-signed it, shit backfired, but I'm bouncing back. I grind it, now me within a pressure. You comprehend me, you want to end me, you offend me. It's drama, feel the trauma. Come with me. Yeah. afraid. Yeah, come with me. I close my eyes and I see you standing there. I cry tears of sorrow. I die. Fuck my enemies, fuck my foes. Damn these hoes, you're stepping on my toes. Back up off me, take your hands off me. Give me room to breathe. I'm not hearing it, I'm not fearing it. I'm up to my ears in it. Bullshit, I'm destructive. Some women find that seductive. Some say it's lunacy. Reluctantly, I've been moving on. I ignore you, sorry if I bore you. I neglect you, don't mean to disrespect you. Can't you see? I love you dearly, and not sincerely, but you annoy me. You can't avoid me. I'm here to stay forever and ever. In a day that's never. I can't let you go. I can't forget it. Why you did it? I won't permit it. I wanna quit it. I wanna fight you. I fucking bite you. Can't stand nobody like you. You can't run. You can't hide. No surprise. Close your eyes. Come with me. Yeah. Come with me. Come with me. Yeah, I like this. Come on. Come on. Turn me up. Need you to turn me up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on now. Yeah. Hear my cries, hear my call. Let me your ears. You ready now? Come on, check this out. Hear my cries, hear my call. Let me your ears. I wanna get this right. I wanna get this right, baby. Hear my cries, hear my call. Let me your ears. See my fall, see my errors, know my faults. Time halts, see my loss. Know I'm lacking, backtracking. Where I met you, pistol packing. Itchy finger, trigger happy. Try to trap me, bad rap. Wiretap me, backstab me. Bring the faith, fall from grace. Tell me lies, time flies. Close your eyes, come with me. Come with me, 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 come with me.